Good evening. I'll call to order this March 11th, 2025 Fairfield Plan and Zoning Commission meeting. Let's start with our meeting minutes from February 25th and February 27th. And the 25th was our executive session? Or is it
25th
27th?
was the meeting, 27th was your closed.
Okay, so the 27th was our closed exec. We're no decisions or votes were taken. So may I have a motion on meeting minutes for those items? Commissioner Corsillo,
Move to approve.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Ford seconds. Commissioner Seibert, you're gonna be sitting in for Commissioner Harrison, who I don't think is on yet. Not hearing her. Commissioner Corsillo.
No
anything?
comments. They look good.
Commissioner Ford,
Yeah, looks fine to me.
questions or comments from the commission? Hearing none, can we put this to a vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Let's take old business out of order. Just because after polling and talking to a few people individually, I think we're gonna be in a position to table of old business items, so I'm gonna call them together. 2179, 2199 Post Road, 29 Fairfield Place. For section 3, A, B, and C. Would request that the commission consider tabling the matter. We just finished fairly recently. We have time. And I'd like to give it a little more due consideration on my end. So having said that, let's at least get a motion, potentially, if anybody agreement of that to table, and then we can discuss that further.
I don't think you can discuss a motion table, but
Well, just
I'll move the table.
not the merits we can't discuss, but just the idea of that the need or not the need for tabling, I think we can discuss. But motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Ford. Commissioner Porcillo.
I agree with what you said, so I don't need to add anything else.
Yeah, I just wanted to take this out of order in case there's anybody here, instead of us going through 10, 15, 20 minutes, to give everybody that courtesy, but hold on, Commissioner Ford.
Nothing further.
Just a quick clarification question. So, time limits.
So our staff has listed on the agenda for A, B, and C, 3A, 3B, the expiration date. X date 4/24 for 3A, 4/24B, well, 4/24 for C as well. So that's April 24th is the last opportunity to make a decision. I'm not suggesting
Act on it.
to act on it. Now, this would carry over to our next
Yeah,
regular.
it would be on every regular agenda until you're ready to ban. We generally don't put old business on special meeting agendas. But it will be on for the 25th of this month.
So that's what we're gonna do going forward with that, so.
Only before you vote, Mr. Chairman, just one housekeeping detail. No need to discuss it, but because this meeting spanned 4 different meetings, there were a handful of commissioners that were at 3 out of 4 of those sessions or 2 out of 4 of those sessions. So no need to respond, but when the time comes, you're going to need to make sure everybody's caught up on the meetings that they may not have.
Okay, so noted. Take note of the commission members, please take note, get up to speed if needed. All right, anything further on this?
Appreciate it because I'd like some time to look at that engineering report, but thank you. I appreciate the extra time.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, it'll go to the next regularly scheduled meeting, and it's up to us as to whether to move forward with it or table it further, so. I think the extra time is helpful, so. I don't know, I know Commissioner Harrison is coming late to this, I hope she doesn't have too much of a problem with it, I can't imagine she will, but I think a tabling is worth it. Having said that, can we put it to a vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Aye. I think I heard Commissioner Braun, so it passes unanimously. All right, again, as I said, I thought it was worthwhile taking that out of turn in case there was anybody around personally or remotely. Next item is our planning director appointment of Emmeline Harrigan as planning director. Not sure if anything needs to be said besides that?
I don't have much to say, Mr. Chairman, other than I sent this commission a letter several months ago detailing my intention to avail myself of the normal retirement date under the town's retirement program. And I explained to you my feelings in that regard. I don't need to repeat them here. I do appreciate the support that this commission has always shown for me. But in that letter, I did strongly recommend that Emmeline replace me as as incredibly qualified and logical successor, and I hope you would agree with that. And it would be effective April 1st.
I think that, yeah, we will make sure with any motion that would be the date of
April
effect.
2nd, we don't.
We do like a
second. Yeah.
Just kidding.
Just kidding.
If it's any consolation, that was exactly my same start date 8 years ago, so
Was it? Okay. So a good, I guess,
it's a good
tradition,
omen.
good tradition. Commissioner Corsello,
Move to appoint Emmeline Harrigan as planning director effective April 1st.
Commissioner Randolph seconds.
Yes.
Commissioner Corsello, go ahead.
So Emmeline, speak a little bit to you. Emmeline has served Fairfield with distinction for the last 8 years as assistant planning director. As Jim said, she is eminently qualified for this position. She brings more than 25 years of planning experience in Fairfield and towns like it, including 23 years as certified professional planner, 12 years as a certified floodplain manager. And I think as we look to this town's future and the need to confront multiple challenges, from the need for more housing to the impacts of climate change on our shoreline, I think having someone as knowledgeable and experienced as Emmeline already on staff is a tremendous stroke of luck for Fairfield. I'll add that beyond her technical qualifications, which clearly exceed the requirements for this position, her time as our assistant planning director, I think ensures that by promoting her into this role, we'll have continuity, something I think is also extremely important as we work to the completion and adoption of our plan of conservation and development, which is a process that she's led. And finally, Emmeline has clearly earned the trust of her peers, fellow planning professionals who elected her as president of the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association. She's earned the trust of our first selectman, Bill Gerber, who's endorsed her for this position. She's earned the trust of our outgoing planning director, Jim Went, and she's earned my trust in the more than 2 years that I've had the opportunity to work with her and learn from her. And it is a privilege for me to be able to nominate you, make this motion to appoint you as our planning director. And I'm grateful for your service to the town, your dedication to the town. And I look forward to all of us benefiting from your expertise and dedication for hopefully many years to come.
Thank you, Tom. Jeff?
Commissioner Corsillo, thank you for that articulated and thoughtful endorsement of Emmeline Harrigan for commissioner. I've been working in the design construction profession for more than 3 decades. And I've had the positive experience of working for some of the leading firms with planners. I work in a number of local communities outside the state with certified planners. And Emmeline is really one of the most qualified, professional, and capable people that I've worked with in my career. And I've worked with a lot of people, mostly out of state. And so I've had a broad range of experience. I think that Emmeline has 3 things that really distinguish her. Her technical expertise, as Commissioner Corsillo outlined, is exceptional. And we're really fortunate to have someone like Emmeline guiding us through these numerous technical matters, which we all experience in all of our meetings. And she's got a great technical depth in a broad range of matters. Secondly, she has excellent, and I've only been working with Emmeline for a year. She has excellent interpersonal skills, which are as important as technical matters because a lot of the things we deal with are emotional, subjective, and Emmeline has I'll just say the bedside manner to help people understand a lot of these technical issues and the difficult decisions that we need to make. Lastly, Emmeline has a deep commitment to Fairfield County and the state. She's she has her master's degree from UCLA in California. Let's come back to Connecticut, which is says a lot about her commitment to the region and the state. And she knows the town very well. So I think those three characteristics distinguish her and make her uniquely qualified. I know that it's always you always wonder who else is out there. I do not think we could find anybody with two, much less three of those characteristics. So I strongly endorse Emmeline.
Thank you. Commissioner Levy?
Yes, I share the comments of my fellow commissioners, Crucillo and Randolph. And just like to add, I've had the pleasure of working with Emmeline for the last 7 years, and I really look forward to continuing to work with her. Thank you.
Dan?
I support the nomination as well. I'm with Jim, logical choice. And I think it makes it easy, especially now because of all these applications and the institutional knowledge she's gained over the last 8 years. So sensible choice. So I'd be supporting people.
So, I mean, I was very excited to come tonight because this is a very exciting and to me a very happy line item in a time that's been very difficult in a lot of ways. And, you know, with emotional applications and difficult applications, we finally got here to have what I think is a very happy occasion and frankly, a very easy choice for us. Which, you know, it just made coming here a lot easier than normal. So I've been working with Emmeline for, I think, since you've been appointed here. And it's been a long time and been very impressed and very reliant upon your expertise. So, you know, I without getting too much more into what was said, I mean, they are, Jeff and Tom are absolutely correct. Your expertise is unparalleled. Your value to Fairfield is unparalleled, and there's, you know, to lose you or not even consider you for this planning director would just be an absolute sham in my view. So when Jim had said that he was looking forward to retirement and, you know, suggested you, obviously, that was an easy decision in my mind. And doing anything else to me just didn't make any sense at all. So for everything that's been said, to the extent that anybody can earn a position, you have done so exponentially. So I look forward to working with you in this new role. This is a great line item to finally get to. So. Can we put this to a vote or is there anything else? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Seaberg, Randa, opposed.
Abstain.
Abstentions. Commissioner Braun abstains. So.
We're allowed to blood rate.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you, Emmeline.
Thank
Congratulations.
you so much. Thank you.
Well done, congratulations.
You know where to find me.
Yes, we do.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, in 38.5 years, that is the vote in which I am most pleased.
Yeah. No, and this is, yeah. I agree. Although I think we probably had to vote for you for appointment.
Yeah,
as
that was no
well.
big deal, but this is.
This
this is-
Yeah.
I hope you don't regret that at this stage. of the game,
No,
but-
maybe your best decision was your second, so.
Best professional decision I've ever made to have Emmeline on board. I could not have a better partner over the last 8 years, and I commend you for your acknowledgement of her qualifications.
So,
You're going to be in much better hands upon my.
well.
We don't have to debate it.
Yeah. All right, thank you for that, everyone. Let's move on to 488 Tungus Hill Road. A little bit of a letdown, but that's okay. Referral of lease of town property pursuant to section 824 of the Connecticut General Statutes, not the line item.
No, that's a tough act to
Not
follow. I don't take offense at all. Congratulations. So I'm before Mark Barnhart, for the record, Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. Just briefly, the town is considering entering into a long-term ground lease for 488 Tungus Hill Road to Operation Hope, so that they might relocate their administrative offices, their food pantry and soup kitchen at the site. The property is about a third an acre. It's improved with a single story, approximately 10,000 square foot building. It was formerly, most recently used as a town garage. It was acquired from the state of Connecticut in, I think, 2001, which the state had used it as a garage facility. And it's in rather poor condition. So much so that the town had considered back a few years ago demolishing the structure in its entirety. When the state transferred title to the town, it imposed certain conditions upon the use of the facility. We went through a process, the town went through a process several years back involving the General Assembly to modify the special act through an act of the General Assembly so that we could purposely enter into a ground lease with a nonprofit such as Operation Hope. So that was approved by the General Assembly through special act and signed into law by the governor. We do have the ability to do that. Operation Hope presently is located in two facilities. One is next in property leased from First Church Congregational, where they have their administrative offices and food pantry. They also have a lease for a town building at 50 Nickel Street, where they have their soup kitchen. The intent is to relocate and consolidate both of those operations at this location. What is before you tonight is planning decision. It's referred under Connecticut General Statutes 8-24. With respect to the town's intent to enter into a lease, obviously the proposed redevelopment of the site will be a separate application at some point in the future, should Operation Hope or the lease itself. So I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
You have a motion on, or should just can ask questions first?
You should probably have a motion.
Yeah. Commissioner Corsillo,
Move to refer favorably.
is there a second? Second, Commissioner Levy. All right, Commissioner Corsillo.
It seems pretty straightforward. Operation Hope does fantastic work for the town. I think they're certainly deserving of their own consolidated location, dedicated solely to the functions they carry out. And obviously, this is just the first step. I think we not to move this forward.
Commissioner Levy.
I'd second it. It's a win-win all the way around.
Comments or questions from the rest of the commission? Is there anything in chat, just in case? No, it's fine. Just figured I had it. Can we put this to a vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one, Mr. Barnhart.
You too. Thanks.
I will call for next new applications for public hearing. I'll call them together. 1320 Kings Highway Cutoff Special Permanent Coastal Site Plan Application of 1320 KHC Associates LLC pertaining to the construction of 5,000 square foot restaurant and retail building in the Design Commercial District. Zoning Regulation Amendment Application of 105 Biro Street LLC for a new section 5.5 Biro Residential District pursuant to section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. 105 Biro Street, application of 105 Biro Street LLC to establish a Biro Residential District on land presently zoned Residence C. Anything special, Mr. Went?
Now, just to ballpark you, the 1320 Kings Highway cutoff is a proposed redevelopment of the vacant Bank of America site that's across the street from McDonald's. The other two are relative to an 8-30G proposal for pardon the pun, but a sister property to the St. Emery's school site, which was their convent, which is now a second piece that's involved with that.
So I'll put on the record for 105 Byro was owned by St. Emery's Associate General Counsel of the Diocese of Bridgeport. As I understand it, I need to confirm this, the St. Emery's sold the property and then it's been resold, so neither the diocese or the parish has any interest in this. But for now, since these two are gonna require a public hearing, this is more ministerial. I'll talk to the town attorney about whether I need to recuse myself of that. But since it is kind of a ministerial thing, I'm gonna just stick with it for now, unless there's any objections from the commission.
It's adjacent to the other one on 108 Byro, or,
It's across the street.
It's across Byro Street. The
oh, I saw it. Yeah, looks the same.
The school, 105 is the former convent across the street.
Thank you.
Public hearings are required for all three. If there's no question, well, let's have a motion for recommendation of public hearing, please. Commissioner Randolph, move to approve to public hearings. Second, Commissioner Ford. Any further questions or comments? Again, hearings are required for them all. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Commissioner Braun?
I said aye, yeah.
That's all right, I didn't hear it. Okay, passes unanimously. We've already addressed the old business and have tabled the three items related to 2179, 2199 Post Road, 29 Fairfield Place. Say in person or remotely, we've tabled those items and we'll go to our public hearing. Which I will call now. Zoning regulation amendment, application of 441 Post Road LLC to amend section 10.4 of the zoning regulations, design resident district. Use section 10.4 sub 3 to allow hotel and resident use and residential density of 40 units per acre on parcels of 6 acres with at least 250 feet of frontage on the post road abutting a tidal wetland along with other ancillary design requirements. 441 Post Road special permit, section 24 and 25, and coastal site plan application of 441 Post Road LLC pertaining to a mixed-use hotel and residential development in the design residential district. Continued from February 25th and March 4th. Attorney Blank.
Yes, Chairman Noonan, thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. Attorney Green is dealing with another hearing at present.
So we'll.
And had asked if we could move to the public and then
Yeah,
come
that's
back to him. But additionally, I just want to point out that late this afternoon, a number of documents were submitted by both Attorney Green and by my office on my side. He can speak to what was submitted on his end, on our end. We did submit, you'd asked for responses to the questionnaire, I'll call it, that Mr. Green had sent out, had about 50 questions. We did submit responses to those. We submitted a tree inventory, some updated civil plans, drainage report and CAM report that responded to the Trinkus engineering report. We had some distance to the creek exhibit, a biodiversity updated information that had been asked for, the hydrodynamic separator specifications that had been asked for, a response to the One Nature memo that you heard about last week that had been asked for, and finally, new renderings and a height exhibit for the architecturals in response to some concerns that were raised at last week's meetings.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that the new stuff came in, so. It's always tough when it comes in the same day, let alone the afternoon, evening, but it is what it is.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Attorney Green is just wrapping down the hall, so he should be back in here forthwith.
Okay, why don't we, okay, thank you, Attorney Blank.
Chairman.
Yeah.
Just a point of clarification, which files, where can we find these files on the shared drive? Which ones are they?
The ones that are.
The ones that are bulleted. Okay, thank you.
That's him literally walking down, then I'll let him go. If not, I'm gonna maybe take one or two members of the public who are ready to go.
New materials posted.
Yes,
Okay.
all right. You see him coming down?
Not yet emerged.
No, that's fine. Let me ask, as Attorney Blanket said, we left off with this with Attorney Green's presentation. He is handling a separate matter. Instead of waiting, sitting on our hands, I'll ask, is there a member of the public that wishes to be heard in person at this point? Come on up. We'll go one at a time until Attorney Green comes. As I've said in the past, if you can please keep remarks to 3-4 minutes. If there's anything that you have in writing, it would be ideal to submit the writing to the public record, which we read, and then hit any highlights. You can just give your name and address and off you go.
Sure, I'm Gail Robinson, President of the Ash Creek Conservation Association. My address is 20 Haddon Street, number 3 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I've already submitted the One Nature memo that you just spoke about earlier, and
Yeah, I saw your
the,
email. I think we.
yeah,
added
the
that to
natural
record.
database,
Mr. Wren, we added
attachment.
that to the record, right?
We did.
Thank you.
Yep, so you've got all that. The only thing, in addition to that, that I just wanted to mention was our concern about the increased volume of stormwater runoff and, the salinity of Turney Creek, because I know that the town has spent a significant amount of money replacing the tidal gates. And the purpose of that in part was to increase the salinity, of Turney Creek, that water body. And that's important because of course you have phragmite that are growing there and they are a fire hazard, which can affect the safety of people in the homes all around the creek. And the runoff, the increased runoff from this development, because it is a sizable development and much bigger than what's there now, works against that. So I really hope that your commission takes that into account because you've worked so hard to deal with this issue of increasing the salinity in Turney Creek. And now you've got a development that you're voting on that is going to be working against that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good evening.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with you. I would like to use the microphone because I don't think that,
That would be great. Thank
I
you.
like to hear, I hope I didn't press the wrong button.
No, you're fine.
That sounds good. My name is Hanor Ratcha. I've lived on the Circle neighborhood since 1969. I lived on Harris Street for a few years and then I found the beautiful street, Sherman Village Drive, and moved on over there. Loved it. I raised my children there. I spent 30 years as a public school teacher. So that's my background. And I love the location. It's just wonderful. You're across the street from restaurants. You're very close to the center. And you can walk places, even though you do take your life in your hands when you do that. I love Luigi's. I even love the Motor Inn. I really do. I think it's great. It looks beautiful on top of the hill. I've had friends stay there. We've gone to the Circle Diner. Back in the day when the Circle Diner was a rustic grotto, we had weddings there, parties. It was great. Things change though, and we need change. We need to have our neighborhoods develop. We need to make room for people. I love change. We want change. But the change has to be reasonable and in line with everything that's going on. I did write a letter and I did make a lot of different notations and a lot of different suggestions to the developers and to future development for Fairfield. I think this one project is not the only oversized development in Fairfield. There are very many others. And I'm sure that, I don't know if you read the Connecticut Post, but right on that one of the headlines today was about a huge development in Bridgeport. And I love the quote. It said, they want to put a whale in a sardine can. So that's how we feel. We're trying to put a whale in a very small place. Anyway, that's how it goes. We want change, but just tonight, I'm going to mention a couple of things because I kind of want to share with you what I've been doing, trying to imagine what a new development might look like. So when you're driving down the post road and you're coming up to that lawn, you see the lawn, it almost looks like you're going straight into it. Well, that lawn won't be there. There's going to be a huge building there. And you'll feel like you're going into the building and then, the road shifts a little bit to the left and then it's a slight upgrade. Anybody, once they've passed the circle and they go up that upgrade, guess what they do? put their foot on the gas. And everybody speeds right up there. They go to 30, 35, 40. I've seen people go 50 miles an hour. So by the time they get to the light at Riverside, you know, they're slamming on the brakes. So it's a very dangerous situation, and adding that driveway, and I think it seems to me that the driveway to the moat to this new proposal is going to be pretty narrow, not going to be very wide. And just in reverse, when you're coming from Bridgeport, you're going up the hill and you see a hill, you're not gonna, that driveway coming out of the motor inn is gonna be almost not such a clear sight line. So as you're driving, people are gonna be turning, it's gonna be, anyway, that's my opinion from just living there for a long time by observation and longevity. Anyway, so I think I told you pretty much everything about that, but actually what I really want you to do is to drive down and imagine the size. Imagine that the building, the sidewalk will be widened, it'll be 8 feet wide, but imagine that where that rock hill is going to be a 5-story building. Imagine how that is going to change the whole situation in our town. There are very many other developments in town. They're very lovely. They look like villages. They're 3-story townhouses with maybe a 3-bedroom apartment on the top floor and 2-bedroom apartments and 1-bedroom apartments. That's the kind of thing we need. We need things that are responsible development, not a 450,000 square foot parking garage with apartments surrounding it. That's kind of what I think. So I really urge the developers to really adjust your plan. Think about people, think about putting in more grass and less concrete, making a playground for kids, putting on a bus shelter. You want to have public transportation? We need a bus shelter. We need a bike room. We need bike parking. Anyway, those are some of the things that I think that we need to have in our developments on 441 and also all over town and in the state. So please, I know you do your best to make decisions based on health and well-being for all the residents and all the people. And I thank you for that. And I know you will continue to do that in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. AI made me these speaking notes. Don't you love it?
It's impressive. Ma'am, do you want to be the last one or do you want to?
If you're ready, go ahead.
Sure.
We also have about 5 people remotely.
Yeah, I always start with in person, then we'd go remote. So yeah, if anybody's joining us remotely and wishes to speak, if you can please sign up in the chat, that will be our sign in, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and just for the record, Mr. Chairman, I'm here, I'm remote. Apologies, I had a meeting that ran late this evening.
Thank you. Well, we're a new business anyway, so there's no voting anymore. So we're all set. As you know, alternates during this time can speak or ask questions. Attorney Green, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, staff. Once again, my pleasure to appear before you on this application.
The mic.
Okay. Do that. Just bear with me for one moment. So I'll speak louder. Hopefully you can hear me. So when the hearing last adjourned a week ago on the 4th, at that time, at the conclusion of the hearing, I had Jim Bubaris on, and he is with us tonight. And I know that the commission had some questions for him, but what I'd like to do is he should be online. Jim, are you there?
What is the, what's the full name?
I'm
Jim.
here, Jim Bubaris.
There he is.
Okay.
So before before we begin with questions from the
ahead.
commission, with the chair's permission, Mr. Buberis has some remarks, additional remarks for the commission.
Okay, start there, and then I know Commissioner Randolph was last up, so. And then we'll go from there.
Can
Go ahead,
you all
Mr.
hear
Buberis.
me?
Sorry.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Let me start off by just apologizing. I made an error last time when I spoke. I had misread and misinterpreted the proposed improvement plan for the Post Road Circle by the DOT. And I was under the impression that the improvement would benefit the East Drive as we know it for this development. What it will do is it will benefit the West Drive. It will be the West Drive where the diner is that will connect to the improvements that are proposed at this time by the DOT. So what I suggest be considered is that every effort should be made as this developer prepares his plan. The first thing we had suggested, and we maintain the same suggestion tonight, is that they reduce the density of what they're proposing, because in my mind, it's just too much for what the system can handle. Secondly, by reducing the development, hopefully this will give them more room so they can make a definitive connection between what they're proposing to do on the middle and east side of their development, to connect it to the west side, so that those who are exiting from this site and heading west, and according to the developer's own traffic consultants, traffic study, 75% of those exiting will be heading west. If they make a better connection to the drive that ultimately will be reconfigured at the west end by the diner, they can then make it so that people exiting will use that and connect to the proposed improvements for the circle, so that when they exit, they're making a right and not a left. So I hope I haven't confused you, and I apologize for the error, but it's still a doable thing with the proposed improvements to connect this site so that you can avoid a left turn out of the site.
Ask him to show that
So-
on the plan. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's fair. Why don't we, if we can pull up the plan quickly,
Which one are we?
I think
Sorry.
any site plan will work probably. Thank you.
It's gonna take 1 second.
Is that all he had for additional comments? At this
No, I
point?
had some questions for him, but I understand the commission.
All right, why don't we go to Commissioner Randolph? Why don't we go while this is being pulled up? So Commissioner Randolph,
Mr. Buberis?
yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Buberis, actually, you anticipated my question. So my question was, if you came out of that west entrance and people elected to do that, would that alleviate, and again, the only, I'll just say, lower grade intersection is coming out of the main exit and making a left-hand turn from the, I'll just say, the courtyard, and which is inconveniences people who are on site. It doesn't inconvenience people who are in the general vicinity or the other intersections. So I'm sorry, my question was a little ambiguous. So first part of the question is, your main concern is people making a left out of the courtyard, correct?
Correct.
And so my question was actually one you just answered from last week, so we're on the same page, is if people were to come out of the exit by the diner, which would allow them to basically go around, we'll call it, or the circle, that would alleviate congestion at the courtyard. which, is that correct?
Correct, it would remove the left turn, okay? And
Well, I'm not saying
definitely-
remove, I didn't say remove, I'm saying there was less volume coming out of the courtyard. And people came out of the, I'll say the diner dedicated curb cut. That would alleviate the volume from the courtyard, correct?
Yes, if you made it easy for them to get to the diner exit in order to use that as the exit rather than the courtyard.
Well, easy is very subjective. I'm just saying, if people were to come out of the diner instead of coming out of the courtyard, that would reduce the congestion coming out of the courtyard, correct?
Correct.
And did you do a synchro study on this?
Did I? I did not, but I reviewed theirs.
So they did a synchro?
Yes, they did.
Okay. And so the synchro study, that's what concluded there was an F, is that? I guess I'll ask them when that comes up.
What would you like me to answer?
Yeah, please.
Yes, it shows that that would be an F.
You did the synchro model, or you just did
The
the
synchro
ITE?
model would, the synchro model shows that the left turn out of the courtyard would be an F.
So that wasn't just an ITE traffic volume, that you did an actual synchro model?
Or he reviewed their synchro model.
Right, but they
I
did do a
reviewed
synchro
their
model?
synchro model, yes,
Okay.
and the synchro model shows that that would be an F.
Okay. That was all I had. Oh, and I guess lastly, did you review sightlines on this, or the sightlines? Are there any issues in the sightlines that give you pause?
No, I agree with their findings.
And just now that we have the diagram up, when you say the west entrance, you mean when you're looking at the plan, the entrance by the diner?
Correct.
Commissioner Levy?
Yeah. You mentioned possible redesign of that western entrance or exit. My question is twofold. How would you redesign it so that people would be more likely to exit from there and then take a right turn and go around the circle? And number two, could that intersection be redesigned so that people coming from the post road could turn right onto the old post road, but then enter the diner that way without having to go through the courtyard?
Well, what they need to do is they need to redesign the diner's driveway to make sure it blends with what the DOT is proposing to do. And now, when the DOT gets into the design, they're definitely going to turn to the town to ask your opinion on what the issues are and what needs to be addressed. And that should be brought up as a concern, and I'm sure in their deliberating over how this is going to ultimately be approved, they'll work it out, okay? They'll come up with something so that the diner's drive becomes one that not only serves the diner, but also is the primary drive for the proposed development, the proposed new development.
And that's prospective?
Excuse me?
Prospective, in other words, when the state gets involved is when you would anticipate that change?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Bubaris, is it your opinion that you think the west drive by the diner should be the main entrance and exit?
For the left, yes. For the right, it could be at the courtyard, okay?
Okay.
A right at the courtyard is fine. A left at the courtyard is problematical. So it's problematic. So the left should be made only at the diner's drive. So you can design both of those driveways in a way that if you're gonna go left out, you're gonna go to the diner drive. If you're gonna go right out, you're gonna go to the courtyard drive.
So your recommendation would be, so out of the courtyard would be a right turn only.
That would be my recommendation, yes. You could have a left in, but you should have a right turn only,
I just follow.
right turn out only.
Mr. Viveras, once again, Joel Green for the record. To the best of your knowledge, has any study been done that routes all of the left turn traffic out of the western driveway?
Has a study been, in other words, has anybody reviewed the impact?
You're offering that as a hypothetical solution. Is that correct?
That everybody make a left out of the diner drive?
Left turns, you just testified that left turns would be accommodated from the diner drive. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my recommendation. I'm not saying that the DOT is looking at it that way. I don't think
And-
anybody's raised the concern to the DOT yet.
All right, that's where I was going with my question. So there isn't really, other than sort of as what I'll call an idea or a concept, that solution has not been supported by any study at this point, to the best of your knowledge, has it?
No, it has not. I don't think anybody's made it an issue yet.
Okay. Commissioner Randolph, and then we'll go to Attorney Green.
Yeah, so just to clarify this, Mr. Uberis, you're speaking in absolute, you're saying eliminate the left turn, but the issue is the volume on that left turn. So eliminating it would bring it down to 0. But you haven't studied it, so I'm a little unclear how you could say, bring it down to 0 when you're saying that there's too much volume coming out. So I just want to clarify your point of view. You're saying eliminate the left turn, but you haven't studied it. I'm not following your suggestion.
What I'm saying is the left turn is a problem, not only because of its volume, it's because of the volume on the street that it has to blend with. So what I'm saying is either you got to do two things. You got to reduce the volume, and you also got to, if you can, eliminate it okay, reduce it as a minimum, but eliminate it by reconfiguring the diner drive and making sure it blends in with any improvement that's made to the circle geometry in the new plan that the DOT is preparing.
Go ahead.
So just to clarify, you're saying reduce, not exclusively eliminate, or are you saying eliminate? Because you're saying both things. I just want to make sure your point of view is clear, because you're saying two contradictory things. You're saying eliminate and reduce. Which could you just clarify your?
What I'm really saying is eliminate it. Okay? Eliminate.
Eliminate
But if
left.
you have to stick
Hold
with
on.
this plan.
Hold on.
reduce
You're
it.
saying eliminate left out of the courtyard exit.
Eliminate the left out of the courtyard exit and force it so that people have to go to the diner where there isn't a left. They can go west by making a right.
Go ahead, but I think.
But you say you haven't studied it. Is that correct? You're saying eliminate it, but you haven't studied it.
What I'm saying to you is there's nothing to study if there isn't a left turn. If
Right,
you
if you-
eliminated the left turn, you don't have to do an analysis of it. It's not there.
I think may I?
Go ahead.
I think what happened here is we are torturing a concept that we've been discussing. We've put up a diagram that's now online. Mr. Viveras, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Is this part of the record?
It was
Your submissions?
introduced by Linda Batchelder last week.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but it's part of the record though. That's all that matters.
It is part of the record.
Thank you.
So just so that we're clear, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And So when you're referring to all left turns, for example, coming out of the Circle Diner, what I was asking is that is not anything that is on the table at the moment. Let's be clear about that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And indeed, this diagram would suggest that that can't be accomplished as all of these plans are presently in the concept phase with the state. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what you are saying, though, and again, the commission will ask you questions, but what you're saying is, in your professional opinion, as the property is presently configured, that left turn, based upon the geometry and based upon the proposed increase in the intensity of the use of this property, in your opinion, the left turn that is proposed, it is your opinion that that is not a viable option, having an unsignalized left turn out of the courtyard driveway at this time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I think that's sufficient for now.
And that is, so you identified this issue involving the driveway and the discussions from last week, but your conclusions in your report that is before the commission, you continue to stand by those conclusions. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
And that is once again that based upon at the present time and as the roads are presently configured at the circle, that in your professional opinion, the left turn out of the courtyard driveway is not a viable alternative or something that this commission should consider at this time.
Correct.
And also, it was your suggestion that ultimately at some time in the future, be it 5 years or 10 years out, there is potential for intersection improvements based on some of the concepts that have been introduced, but we are not there at this time.
We are not there at this time, no.
I don't know if the commission has any further questions.
Further final questions from, well, maybe not final, but further questions at this point, or can we move on?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Hi, Alexis Harrison here. I'm remote. Do you think this change would be, we are supposed to be planning for our community. Do you think this would be proper planning for the town of Fairfield if we pass this? What is your opinion on that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, just from your
Barris?
perspective.
What I'm suggesting to the commission, I respectfully suggest to the commission that they consider that there would be an issue here with the left turn out of this development if it's done the way it's being proposed by the developer. It should be readdressed. You should ask the developer to readdress it. I'm sure the developer has an opinion on all this, but you should ask that it be readdressed because level of service F to the point that it would be a 90-second delay on average for that left turn is not a good thing. And if there's a way to remedy it before they put a shovel in the ground, they should definitely consider it. Here's the time to do it.
And if I may, and just to put a point on it, is it your opinion based on your education, training, and experience that the that the ingress and egress as configured presently in the application is unsafe?
Be more specific as to the courtyard, I think. He's been,
All right. Well, as to the courtyard driveway,
right, I mean, he's been pretty clear, I think, that the other one, the west one is actually the focal point of the amendment.
well, as it's configured right now, the courtyard driveway is left and right, and as I
No, I
understand.
know, it just, maybe just to the courtyard, that's but his opinion so far.
All right, so the courtyard driveway where all left turns are presently proposed to exit the site would be unsafe. Is that your opinion?
That would be my opinion. It would be unsafe and it would be congested. And when you get congestion, considerable congestion, people get antsy and they start to take chances. So therefore, it would be unsafe.
Thank you. I think that's enough of the left turn, right?
That's it.
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Harrison, anything further?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right, okay, we can move on.
Yeah, so that concludes obviously
Traffic.
our presentation on the traffic issue. So I have some remarks that I just wanted this moment. First of all, I want to thank the commission for your generous patience. I'll apologize. Somehow this weekly meeting situation, I know it's a huge imposition on the commission, and as you deal with the volume of business you have right now. But in the past, your meetings have meshed perfectly with the town of Westport, and I'm so out of sync at the moment. So I appreciate your patience and your help with that. And so last week, I had introduced, and I had made remarks saying that, you know, unlike so many applications that are before you right now, this presents a text amendment where you have a significant amount of discretion in terms of your planning function. And I had submitted a memo to the commission as a means of sort of bringing some of the planning to do two things. One, to bring some of the planning issues sort of to the forefront and identify some of the issues, but also kind of as a time saver to have the applicant respond and sort of get the full application out there. And I felt that the initial presentation left a lot of questions. So I presented these questions in the form of a memo, which the commission had presented to the applicant for response. I was away for a portion of last week, but I had called from Wednesday on. I called the zoning department each day, and I checked the website to see what was up and on the website. And I had also emailed Mr. Wendt and Ms. Harrigan a couple of times to see if I had missed anything. And once again, I'm representing an intervener, so I would have expected to receive some documents if they're as sort of as a heads up simultaneously with the commission. So I had held up. I know that there was some soil testing issues that the applicant was going to deal with, and some additional test holes and test borings, which the applicant was going to perform, and that they were going to be done, as I understand it, last week. So I had held up on Rima, Mr. Logan, one of our consultants, on sort of the environmental issues and impacts. And I had held him up on completing his report till that information was available. And we didn't receive anything till 5:30 this afternoon. And I understand that there's been an email provided with a link to, I guess, the information that is responsive to my, I don't even know, because there's an email with a number of documents that has been presented by the applicant. I have not had a chance, other than opening the link at 5:30, and my hearing began with Westport at 6 o'clock. I couldn't identify what's included. So my question is the applicant going to introduce what it has submitted? Or is it the commission's position that we proceed based on the old documents and then appear again on the new documents? I don't know.
I don't have a
it's
full
voluminous.
understanding of what's in there. I mean, Attorney Blank, come on up again if you don't mind, please. Because he had given a kind of a quick summary of what they are is up there again in the beginning, and I'm sorry, it kind of escapes me.
Now, in fairness to the applicant, once again, we're going week to week, and I know there's not 2 weeks or a month between meetings. So it creates a burden on the applicant too, but
Well, everybody, yeah, I get that. So, Attorney Blank, I know I'm asking you to repeat yourself, but if you can just kind of go through what was in that update.
Sure, I'll go through what's in the update. And look, It is week to week. It's a scramble to get stuff in and we got your stuff.
I get it.
Kind of happens to everybody. There was about 50 questions from Attorney Green that he had asked. We provided responses to, I think, like 48 of them. There's one or two that we were still working on. So you have that in one document. A second document was asked about what trees were going to be removed and what trees were going to be planted. And there were questions about the sizing of those. So there's a new diagram that shows that. There was Mr. Trinkus's engineering report. That's the engineer that Mr. Green retained, had some comments about mislabeling or clarifying some information. In response to that, we did clarify in the civil plans, drainage report and CAM report in response to those Trinkus concerns. There was an issue about difference in the biodiversity index. There was a couple of animals or species that were listed by us, and there was a couple that some of the neighbors had pointed out. Could we clarify the document that clarifies that distinction? There was a question, again, I think it came from Mr. Trinkus, but about the hydrodynamic separator and the specifications and whether we were meeting water quality standards. So we put in the specifications for that hydrodynamic separator. There were some requests by the commission, I think more than Mr. Green, that people didn't like the colors on the revised renderings and that maybe there was a bait and switch of some sort. So could we lighten up the renderings and make it clear on the materials? So we provided a new renderings. It's all the same materials in our original plans. It's just a different color scheme. And there's a response to the One Nature memo. Those are the materials.
Yeah, and a lot of this strikes me as rebuttal evidence and testimony that you're kind of getting, I guess, before actual rebuttal. So, my thought is like, I would move forward as best we can with what we have here, but even the questions of the memo struck me as a very succinct way of asking questions in opposition and then getting those answers in rebuttal. And I guess the good thing, I'm not sure if it's good or bad, what you got was rebuttal stuff during public comment.
Yeah, when I ask questions, and I'll open the document, but when I ask questions about, is there a restaurant? Is there an active restaurant? Is there a bar? Is there office? Is there a function space? Those are all things that we should know before we are presenting so that we understand the nature and intensity of the use. That's not rebuttal. That's basic information that the public needs to address the application. So is there a bar and restaurant proposed in the hotel that's open to the public? Because that implicates, once again, traffic and parking issues. Is there a retail space? Is there office space? Those are basic questions.
The basic questions I think now that have been kind of given the answers to, and those uncertainties you had known about and had the opportunity to address, I guess, at this point. First off, I think they answered the question already with the bar and stuff. I thought they said that they were gonna have a bar, but not gonna have a main banquet hall. So that was, I thought, asked by one of us early on as to what that use was. So, I'm not, I guess the question you're asking me, I guess, is you want time to review this and keep the public hearing open to see if there's anything that's there. That's more your practical question, I think.
Well, I don't believe that this is all rebuttal. I believe it's basic information about the proposal.
That's a lot of information you get on rebuttal is something you prefer getting on the initial application anyways. That's always constant for these types of hearings.
I understand that, but we would be responding to the application if we understood the full nature and extent of the application.
Well, at least let me ask you this. At least I've been focusing on the questions. Everything else that he's been saying, the engineering, responding to engineering report, responding to the wildlife or the environmental. Again, that's something, I would address completely in rebuttal. If it's really just the questions that you're having at issue, what I would suggest is either continue on with your presentation, let the public talk, see what the answers are, and let's be a little more specific as to if you need additional time, or if you're asking for additional time to review something, then we can be a little more specific on it.
Maybe I can,
Cause I assume you have your engineer that still needs to go.
I have my engineer who's going to respond to the plans as they existed before 5:30 today. So if there are changes to the stormwater system or soil or the blanks are being kind of filled in on the questions that Mr. Trinkus is asking about the test borings, or there were no test borings before where the galleries are, and now the information is available, I can have Mr. Trinkus talk about the infirmities of the system where there are no test borings, but now I understand there are test borings. So
Well, you said last time that they had been scheduled for last week. I remember that much.
I know, but I don't usually walk in to an application with a stormwater system where the test borings are not complete.
Can I clarify?
Yeah,
And
hold on, who's, sorry.
I'm the engineer.
so,
Who's
hold
expert?
on, hold on 1 second, Andy. Andy's
No, no,
our
yeah,
engineer. So 2 things. Number 1 is that in general, these are all responses to the comment that would typically come at the end. This is kind of helpful for them to have it now in advance, maybe not as helpful as having it a week ago. But again, they've known about this project for months and we didn't get their concerns until a week ago in writing. So they limit our ability to respond.
I mean, this is what I would suggest doing. I mean, let's continue with the presentations that you have.
Okay.
Based on the information that you have. I'm gonna turn to the public. You're gonna have time to kind of review them as best you can. If there's something specific that you think that's a material change that's not really within the footprint of what's being proposed,
Okay.
then we can discuss that. But I mean, that's not, and I understand you only gave me a 40,000 foot view of what they are, but that's not the sense that I got right off the bat. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that's not the sense that I got. So let's not belabor the point here. Let's move on with the presentations because I want to hear everything that has to be said here. And then I want to turn to the public and let them have their say. And I think at that point, if there's something specific in between, then we can discuss it. I would have been happily surprised if we finished tonight. Anyways, be frank. And
Can we at least get the test result, the new information? I don't mean just,
is it updated?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
All right,
updated.
it's
It
updated.
was test holes originally.
There always
Yeah, I
were
remember
test
you I
holes.
remember you
There's
saying there
more
were
now.
Hold on, we don't need to go crazy. I remember you saying test holes and that there were further ones being scheduled, so. All right, but that's updated, Commissioner Braun. I mean, we gotta press, I mean, what else are we gonna do? I mean, we gotta press forward with what we have, so we can be as efficient use of our time. And we got this just like you got it, so I mean,
All right, so as I understand, I represent a neighborhood group, the Fairfield Circle Neighbors for Responsible Development, but I also represent an individual intervener. So I suppose we'll have an opportunity to respond as an intervener anyway, but but it's the position of the commission then that the public will be able to address the new materials that have been submitted.
to the extent that there's something more than rebuttal, then I would, yes. I mean, if it's classic rebuttal, then, it's gonna be classic rebuttal. We're just gonna, it's gonna end the public comment, at least for that topic, and move on. I mean, they get the last word, and it's not unusual for the public is saying, we want more trees, and they give more trees. That's kind of the end of it at that point. They don't get.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just been my experience that usually the applicant will make a presentation as to changes or modifications. Now, I understand the categories have been identified, but as long as we'll have an opportunity.
I need more specifics as to what the documents are, and I can't give them to you because I haven't reviewed them.
Fair enough.
Because as you said, I just got your stuff this afternoon and evening. I got their stuff this afternoon and evening.
Fair enough.
So
So I'm going to introduce at this point, Mr. Anthony Fino, and just briefly, and if we can call up that site plan that was up earlier, the site plan that shows the overall site with the access ways, not the state, the applicant's site plan. Got up earlier. Mr. Fino, are you with us?
He is there.
his name showed up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was trying to unmute my mic there. I'm here.
All right. So, Mr. Fino, would you, I know that we submitted a resume for you this afternoon, but for the benefit of the public and the commission, would you briefly identify yourself and identify your education, training, and experience?
Yeah, so my background is in fire service. I've been in professional fire service for almost the past 25 years. I currently am employed by the town of Stratford. My position there is deputy fire marshal. I had a similar role in the city of Milford for over 20 years, and I've been doing some private consulting for the last 3 to 4 years as well.
Thank you. So just by way of introduction for the commission, as this application involves a proposed text amendment, and obviously in the exercise of good planning and pursuant to Section 8-2 of the Connecticut General Statutes, text amendments obviously provide the commission with an opportunity to consider a variety of factors in adopting and discretion in adopting regulations and indeed amending regulations. And I had called upon Mr. Fino as an expert on emergency access and apparatus, emergency apparatus access and the like, because initially when I looked at this application, it struck me that the access for emergency vehicles, I questioned how robust the access was, the quality of the access and the like. In speaking with Mr. Fino initially, I became aware that the city of Milford, as part of its planning function and being involved in sort of a similar situation as we see in Fairfield with a robust quantity of development, both in terms of what I'll call market rate development and 8-30G development. But the city of Milford began to look at its how it would plan to have access for emergency responders with the sort of the rapid influx of larger residential and commercial buildings in the city of Milford. And the city of Milford had actually adopted a regulation that set high standards and requirements to assure that these buildings provide safe access. And so I discussed this with Mr. Fino and asked him to take a look at the site plan and sort of both sort of assess it from perhaps a code standpoint, but also significantly for this commission as you adopt regulations at best practices sort of concept. So Mr. Fino, can you just briefly discuss what you reviewed in response to this application?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, looking at this, it's a very, I've seen a lot of these type of developments, both in Stratford and in my time in Milford. And typically when you see a building of this size, both height and area, or the two buildings, the code is going to require at least 2 fire department access roads. Effectively, just by coincidence, you're probably going to have to use Post Road as one of them. So that's going to become your first access road, and it's already there. The second one is going to be, I guess we're calling it maybe the southeast side, but the rear of the complex, where it says emergency access drive and public access walk on the drawing. So that being needed as your second fire department access road, they're going to have certain requirements they have to meet there for width. Then also, when you look at the building with this height, you're most likely going to require an aerial apparatus access road. So if you're not familiar, a fire department aerial apparatus is the one with the ladder on it to reach the taller buildings. So that's probably going to get required based on the height of these proposed buildings. And that makes the access road requirement even wider than the standard access road. So one of my areas of concern when I looked over these drawings that Attorney Green presented to me was on that rear access road. They seem to be proposing to use some type of permeable paver or turf stone style paver. And although that's not expressly precluded from being used in the code. I don't know if that would handle the live load requirement for the fire department access. So again, I don't know the engineering on it. I didn't see the spec, but typically your minimum load you have to account for on that road is going to be 75,000 pounds. It could be more depending on the apparatus that Fairfield uses. We'd have to check with the Fairfield Fire Department to ensure that, but minimum it's a 75,000 pound load that you need to account across the whole road, not just a certain point of it. So that was one of the areas.
Okay, and what about the proximity of the access, the proposed access, emergency access along the back of the structure? The proximity of the access to the structure. Can you talk about those considerations?
Yeah, so if they're going to try to provide aerial apparatus access or a point for that, which they would need to do for both buildings based on the height, the hotel and the apartment building, you have to have that road, the leading edge of that road has to be not closer than 15 feet to the building and not further than 30 feet away. The reason for that is when they set up the aerial, just like if you were setting up a ground ladder to clean your gutters at your house, it has to hit at a certain angle or it could be dangerous. So they kind of shoot for approximately a 70 degree angle of approach. So if the apparatus was set up too close to the building, it would be too high of an angle. And if it's too far away, it's too low of an angle. So the code requires, again, that leading edge of the aerial apparatus access road has to be at least not closer than 15 feet and not further than 30 feet away. So as it sits right now, I believe it's too close to the apartment building if you're looking at the rear. And I don't know if an aerial apparatus could maneuver to even get at the backside of the hotel building.
Just to be clear, is that based on code or good practices?
So right now in the fire code, that they do not require aerial apparatus access. It is in the model code, the International Fire Code, which is what our code is based on. So yes, I would say it's a good practice. I base most of that requirement on my time in Milford, where, as Attorney Green mentioned, we did adopt by ordinance some requirements for apparatus that were stricter than the minimum fire code, and we have aerial apparatus access requirements there.
And is that model code something that is presently in discussion for adoption by the state of Connecticut?
Correct. Currently, the proposal is to adopt the 2024 editions of all the applicable model codes, International Fire Code being one of them. Hopefully, they presume to adopt that in March of 2026. And as it stands now, the draft document does include the requirement for aerial apparatus access.
And we talked about, and can you also just comment on the actual use of those permeable pavers in terms of sort of maintenance, winter usage and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so just as an AHJ or fire marshal, my concern for those would be the maintenance of it. I mean, obviously, just like any path that's required for egress or fire department use, it has to be maintained clear and unobstructed at all times. So obviously living in New England, snow and ice can be an issue. I don't know how easy that type of street system or paver system is to keep clean of snow and ice during winter months.
All right. Moving on to access to the building, and you did say that by code, this does meet technically having an access point on the other side of the building. That does meet the present code. Is that correct?
Yeah, it should. Again, I don't have, looking at the drawings like this, I don't have blue beam or anything where I can drop points and measure things. I don't know the width on the back. I don't know if it meets a minimum 20-foot width. I don't know if the engineer of record knows offhand what the width of that access road is.
We talked about the front of the building, and you said that typically this building would rely on access for the main portion of the residential structure for access from the post road. Is that correct?
Normally, yeah, something like the post road would be the easiest place to get it because you're guaranteed you're going to get your unobstructed width there. The problem you get into is and again, without being able to scale it, I don't know if your setbacks are going to work for aerial apparatus, if you're gonna provide that. I'm pretty sure for the hotel, it's gonna be too far away, but. And then you have the overhead obstructions, I think, I had mentioned in my report. You know, if you have an aerial apparatus access road, once you designate it, you can't have any overhead obstructions in the way. So Post Road is going to be problematic because I think you have the power lines running across that side of the street.
Emmeline, are you able to show the two photos that I had submitted into the record, showing the access along the Post Road? I can resend them to you.
Let me see where they are. Okay, yep, got it.
So among the questions that I had asked, and I don't know what the response was, and maybe the applicant can comment on that, but the notion that all the power lines, utility lines in front of the property, you can see this is a picture that I took of the power lines running eastbound from the present easterly driveway of the property, and this shows power lines that exist in front of the bulk of the residential structure. Then the other photo.
Oh, did it switch? No.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And this is the view towards the west from the eastern end of the property, looking towards the circle. And I believe that this is a stone area, the ledge that is proposed to be excavated as part of the project. But once again, the commission can see the power lines are significant. The applicant, as I understand it, as part of its text amendment, is seeking, I believe, a 15-foot setback from the right of way, but that doesn't include balconies and porches. And I would suggest that if the commission were to ever consider a text amendment like this, commission would take some time to incorporate some of these access features that Mr. Fino has described. And just once again, Mr. Fino, the structure relies on access from Post Road for aerial access as it's presently proposed, correct?
Yeah, based on the drawing that I saw that was submitted, the rear wouldn't comply at this time.
And so what you're saying then is any sort of aerial access being a ladder. And I understand you haven't scaled it, but the consideration is whether having power lines located such as we're showing right now obviously presents significant access concerns.
Correct. If you're going by the way the model code is written, an aerial apparatus access road, you're not allowed to have any overhead obstructions. So they'd have to be removed.
You said, just to be clear, model code, not, that's the one that's not been adopted. That's, we're not talking
Correct.
about the code. Okay.
And
Correct.
in terms of the regulations that were adopted by the city of Milford, they addressed all of these. So Milford was proactive in addressing these model code issues in order to deal with the many large-scale residential developments that have been proposed there.
Yeah, essentially they adopted all of the stricter model code provisions before the state gets to it or got to it or presumably might next year. But yes, that's what they adopted.
Can you just very briefly discuss sort of the categories and how they apply?
In the IFC requirements?
The Milford requirements.
Oh, so what happened was in Connecticut, they adopted a different set of requirements from a different model code. They used requirements that came out of NFPA 1. So it's a different model code publisher. The IFC publishes a fire code and their requirements just happen to be stricter. So when the authorities in Milford, whether it's police, fire, and everybody that was involved in the planning and zoning adoption process there, at the time I was working there, we decided to adopt the stricter of the two model codes. And that requires some of the things that I talked about in my recommendations here for aerial apparatus access. And again, I did looking at the drawings that were submitted based on the architecturals. And I know, I mean, you're still probably in the design development phase, so things might change, but that looked to me like a wood frame building. So again, it's probably like a type 5 wood frame construction, which presents a significantly greater fire hazard than potentially some taller buildings are built non-combustible or fire resistive. So again, I don't know if the engineer or designer of record could correct me, but it looked like they're going to be proposed to be wood frame structures, both the hotel and the apartment building.
And so these are sort of best management practices that you would recommend that this commission adopt in amending its regulations for sort of these larger residential structures.
Correct. The state of Connecticut is being recommended to adopt these standards as well. And presumably, I think they will be in the first quarter of next year. But in the meantime, yes, any town or local jurisdiction that's going to be approving site drawings for buildings, I think should seriously consider adopting them, because if not, you know, unfortunately, you may have buildings that are built to a lesser life safety standard, and then maybe 9 to 12 months from now, it becomes the code and you're not going to be able to rebuild these things.
I don't know if the commission has questions. I
think
would.
Commissioner Harrison does. So Commissioner Harrison?
Sorry, I have a question for Mr. Is it Fino?
Yes.
Hi, Alexis Harrison, just for the record. I just had a question, and I'm not sure if you're addressing this tonight, just about staffing numbers.
Okay.
Are you familiar, I guess it would be, is it the NFPA, National Fire, gosh, what does it stand for? I just lost my screen, so I can't find it.
Protection Association. Yep.
Yeah,
familiar.
and I'm just curious because this came up in an 830G application we had a few years ago regarding if Fairfield would have enough staffing to deal with a building of this size. And I know are you familiar with the Fairfield Fire Department, how much personnel we have?
I don't know the exact number, but I know typical communities. I know in Milford what they have on duty at any time, and obviously in Stratford, I would assume they're similar.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number now, but I think at one
Okay.
point, this is about 2 or 3 years ago, I would think there were like 28 on duty in Fairfield. I guess
Okay.
of a building this size, what would be the recommended personnel based on those standards? Would you know that?
Well, again, they don't recommend personnel based on necessarily the building height and area per se. But again, depending on what your community has for, on-duty fire service at any time, buildings that are built with safety features included, meaning type of construction, fire protection systems such as sprinkler systems, things like that. And obviously having access and water supply is going to make firefighting easier. If you provide less life safety protections in those areas, then you're going to make it obviously more difficult for the fire department and less safe, regardless of how many people they have. Remember, there's only going to be so many apparatus that you can set up on any one building just because of the access. Even if you're providing, A+ access around the building above and beyond, there's still they're big trucks. There's only going to fit so many there. So providing the right amount and having it in the right dimensions and size criteria is kind of critical for proper firefighting operations, if that helps.
No, that is helpful. Thank you. I guess again, I'm not going by the Fairfield standards. So I don't have them in front of me. I don't want to misquote anything, but towns typically have X number of fire personnel need to make a call within a certain amount of minutes, right? Is that correct or am I wrong?
No, they're going to have, yes, whatever their manpower is, staffing, their minimum staffing on at all times. And then they're going to have what's called, you get what's called a first alarm, which is your normal response to a structure fire. Then depending, a lot of towns don't have enough staffing to handle large incidents. So then when they call what's called a second alarm or third alarm, you're generally going to mutual aid. So I'm sure Fairfield Fire Department has mutual aid agreements with surrounding towns, whether it's Westport or Bridgeport, they probably have both. And then they have to call for those towns to send people in.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Randolph?
Mr. Fino, so you raised a few issues. One is the load capacity of the grass crate.
Yes.
And you said you didn't know what the capacity was, but it's a concern.
Right. On the drawing package that I saw, I didn't see any engineering or DOT spec on that for load.
Sure,
Maybe.
But
I don't-
you said you didn't know what the capacity of the grass crate was. You were just saying that it needed to meet the requirement, correct?
Correct. They would have to show that on the drawing.
Yeah, okay. So that's just
If
something.
that's what they,
And then you said, it's recommended to have 2 access roads, and you said they have 2 access roads?
assuming they're going to use the back, yeah, that second road in the back, yes. It would have to comply with the requirements for width for access, though.
And then, so, correct. So I just want to clarify that point you raised. And then lastly, the buffer, the Grass Creek buffer, the fire access buffer, which is not in code right now in our municipal code, but it is in NFPA and IFC, correct?
The rear access road?
No, just the perimeter access for a ladder truck.
You mean the proximity?
The access buffer around the building for a ladder truck is specified in IFC and NFPA, correct?
No, just in the IFC, International Fire Code.
And so you're saying that that buffer needs to be minimum of 15 feet, a maximum of 30 feet from the power line?
Correct.
So that would require that every building in the town of Fairfield be 30 feet away from a power line? If we were to
No,
adopt that?
so the codes only go for new developments. So typically when you adopt these things, they're for new, obviously, we're not going to
But
go
any-
into.
But
what?
any new development would need to be 30 feet from a power line.
No, just the area designated as aerial apparatus access. So if you took,
Right.
you'd say a typical rectangular building and you want to take the A side, we'll say the front of the building, and you want to design that as your aerial apparatus access road, the front face of that building, yes, the leading edge of that road would have to be between 15 and 30 feet from the building,
So,
but not the whole building.
not the whole building. So could you just clarify that? Because I'm a little confused because as I understand the design for the perimeter for the access ladder is a buffer around the building. And so what would the minimum setback be? Are you suggesting because the proximity of the power lines, we would need to create a buffer between the power lines and the building?
Maybe if you have the drawing up, it might be easier to speak on it. Okay,
I'm
so are
referring
you,
to the area where the trees are planned south, west. Not where the hotel
so in
is,
front of
but-
the hotel?
No, in front of the building of the hotel.
Okay, so yeah, so if Post Road fit within that area of 15 to 30 feet there, and yes, you could theoretically design that as your aerial apparatus access side of the building. And yeah, there should be no overhead obstructions on the face of that building. So, I mean, maybe make it easier, just look at the hotel. If we're just gonna look at the hotel and we wanted to make that Post Road street, the aerial apparatus access road, the area from one edge of that building rectangle to the other edge, you would have to not have any overhead obstructions there. Does that make sense?
I'm thinking, I'm sorry, I'm just asking about in plan, what would the minimum setback need to be to meet the requirement that you're suggesting IFC would dictate?
15 to 30 for the leading edge of that road, 15 feet to 30 feet.
So that if we're suggesting that every building in the town needs to be 30 feet back from the power line for every new building.
No, not necessarily, because you could make the aerial apparatus access road any other side of the building you're building. And again, we'd only be talking about new buildings, so we wouldn't be modifying existing developments, correct? So when we're looking at a new building.
Could the courtyard meet that requirement in this plan?
Possibly, but I think, well, so for the back, if we're looking at the apartment building, the area behind pools and amenities, I think it says. I don't believe that's wide enough and it's too close to the building. So again, it could maybe be redesigned to meet that requirement, but as it's sitting on the drawing we're looking at, it wouldn't comply.
It wouldn't comply. I'm sorry, I'm clear. So you're saying we're too close to the power line, but we don't need to design for the power line?
I think we're talking about two different roads here.
He was
So the
talking about-
access road in the back wouldn't have power lines, correct?
Right, but you raised the power line, the distance from the power line is a governing issue. But now you're saying it doesn't necessarily need to be a governing issue. I'm just unsure what you're.
No.
Stating here.
It is a
Can
governing
I just
issue.
jump in?
Go ahead.
The purpose of this expert is to identify issues, obviously, that the commission should consider in amending regulations. There are possibilities which Mr. Fino can discuss with you, including requiring that power lines be underground, proximate to structures. If you are going to have buildings of this kind within 15 feet of a road, exempting, again, balconies and porches can be within the setback. But if you're going to do that, for example, there should be an ordinance or regulations that say you either have to demonstrate that 15 to 30 foot clear zone so that a ladder truck can approach a building, or bury the utility lines. And that's why when I asked these questions in my memo last week, I asked, addressing these issues, whether it was intended that the lines were going to be buried, what the construction of the buildings is proposed to be, and the like. So you're asking good questions in terms of that setup, but there are other alternatives to just saying all buildings have to be 30 feet back, but there should be standards and requirements adopted by this commission as part of the planning process.
I'm just hearing different objections to the standard. One of them is saying power lines are too close. And anybody who's been to any city with a four-story building knows that power lines are in close proximity to buildings. So that just doesn't align with, I think, our lived experience. And making a requirement to put power lines underneath would essentially prevent us ever from putting a four-story building in, because you're not going to do that.
Wow.
So,
Well, that's not, I mean, that's all, yeah.
I think that's an
Great, Eversource, all that
assumption.
kind of stuff.
I'm just unclear on what the objection, what the concern is, because I'm hearing that power lines are too close to this building as designed, but I'm hearing that there are alternatives to that, not bearing power lines, but from access. So I'm just a little bit unclear on what the objection is.
Clearly, the objection is that right now you have a large residential structure. There's been a discussion that you can access it either from public right-of-way, the public street, but you also must have a secondary exit, a secondary access behind the building. In this case, we've identified that there is a secondary access that we have raised questions on that are not identified. Those questions are not answered in the documents submitted by the applicant as we've seen them. And also access for emergency vehicles is obviously also considered from the post road. But right now, there are significant power lines. The applicant is proposing to have a setback of 15 feet from Route 1, not including decks and projections. And what we're saying is there are other considerations that go into this sort of a plan, such as aerial access as a best practice going forward. That's why this witness, this expert has been presented.
Let me ask this one preliminary question. I apologize, I stepped out. But are we when firemen come with ladders, they're not going over the power lines, are they? Or are they?
I think that's
sometimes
the big point.
Well, I would like
directing
to
that
ask.
to me?
Yeah, well, I guess that'd be more clear because you're the expert.
Right. So
that
what
if it's
the other
close-
gentleman proposed about the existing buildings where they have power lines, and he's correct, yes. And it presents safety and extreme challenge for firefighters to operate an aerial apparatus with the power lines there. They have to either go above them or underneath them. Both provide challenges and are a safety risk. That's why in the International Fire Code, they precluded those and don't permit them anymore for the aerial apparatus access road. So the whole intent of the code and why we adopt newer codes every 3 or 4 years and the codes get bigger and stricter is to try to make things better and safer as we
That's
go
fair.
forward.
No,
So
that's fair. I mean, I guess I want to make sure as far as like going above it, I wasn't, but that is a possibility. Challenge is obvious because you're going above the power line.
correct.
But again, in your points taken about the model code, but it's fair to say, I think, that the fire marshal has given at least initial preliminary comments that didn't raise these issues, that if, that the fire marshal in Fairfield found that this was in compliance with what our current code is, not at least the model code, but the current code. And I guess if you can confirm that, number one, and number two, in your review of anything, did you find any issues with the Fairfield Fire Marshal's conclusions?
I didn't see his report if he issued one. So you're telling me that he did review this and approved it?
I mean, I think at least in code review, I mean, I listen, I know your point about how it's not binding, but it's still something we've always considered and something that if there was an issue in the code review, you'd point to me to the code review and say that it needs to be addressed. But I understand, at least in the code review minutes, that there was, I don't know what you want to call it. Well, Mr. Wen, do you have the code review by chance?
We do.
Might as well just say it more specifically than my memory.
You want to have a copy of it, or what are you asking me?
Can I just take a quick
Yeah,
look
sure.
at it? Oh, is that it?
Oops,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, I just remember at least any comments that anybody had on the code review were either going to be addressed or addressed. So, and he noted, thank you. I mean, you can see it in the record. He notes however many, 1 through 19, it looks like. So and I'm not gonna go through them all, but I just remember at least the applicant saying that all the things were addressed, so. And is there any issue, at least with, as far as you can tell, with the current code that this plan violates?
I didn't ask Mr. Fino to review the current
Okay,
code.
that's fine. Then I'll retract my question. If he's not ready for it, or if that's not what he's being proffered
It
for.
just seems to me that this commission is being asked to do something we've never done in Fairfield. We have a project with a 110-room hotel and 250 residential units and a restaurant on a single site. You're being asked once again to amend your regulations to allow the development of this scale. And it seems to me that we've identified issues, and maybe we do. Maybe as part of this process, the fire marshal should be consulted and to see if it would be, and I can't imagine that the fire marshal wouldn't favor incorporating some access requirements for aerial equipment when we start considering developments of this scale.
We can certainly ask the fire marshal directly in our own capacity. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
But I'm not sure it's fair to say
Well-
it didn't come up in code review, so.
Well, I mean, there's certain fairness though about, we've heard this with our own POCD. Using draft code or regulations or best practices that are not adopted, and then using that against an applicant that hasn't been adopted yet either. So I mean, it kind of cuts both ways. I mean, your point is taken that, there's best practices that, should be maybe considered, but we do have enacted regulations that speak to a specific code that we look to. So, it's. I mean, right? I mean, am I
Good
asking?
question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Braun.
I was gonna ask about the roof, because there's a roof party deck with a bar, like kind of behind the swimming pool area. And also the rear of the building is like 60 to 70 feet tall, depending on if it's more stories on the rear, because it goes downhill. So the rear is like 5 stories, either 60 or 70 feet, plus you add the pergola or whatever, not the pergola, the cupola thing on top of the building. Does that change the distance? That sort of 70 what percent slope of the ladder that you need? Like, does the distance that the truck has to have in the back of the building from that paver driveway, does that change based on the height of the building? And also, is there any concern over the party deck being sort of set back from the road beyond the swimming pool area?
No, so the aerial apparatus distance, that 15 to 30 feet, is prescriptive. It's written in the code and there isn't any change to it. The reason being is if you can get the road in that distance, the angle is going to be close enough to what we need. And remember too, the aerial apparatus, they don't have unlimited heights. So they're all going to be a standard, probably 75 foot to maybe 110-foot ladder. So 15 to 30 is going to be what the code, the model code would require. And again, it's prescriptive, it's not discretionary, so.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further with Mr. Fino?
Nothing further at this time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Pino. All right. So at this point, I would like to call Steve Trinkus, Trinkus Engineering. You have his CV and you also have his report, although once again, his report is based on, I believe, documents that may be supplemented or superseded at this point.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For the record, Stephen Trinkus. I'm a licensed professional engineer in Connecticut since 1988. Also an expert in low impact development, which will focus on runoff volumes and water quality from development. So, you know, I reviewed the prior application. I did have a chance to take a quick look at the revisions, but you know, a lot of it is water quality. I agree with the applicant. You don't have to provide detention when you're in a coastal environment. However, the smaller gallery system, which is behind the main building, it's getting mostly roof runoff. Professional literature shows that 40% of our nutrient loads, nitrogen and phosphorus, come via atmospheric deposition. It's occurring, you know, as we speak outside. You don't see it, but on impervious surfaces, it sits. When it rains, it washes off. There's absolutely no treatment of that roof runoff that goes into that, I guess would be eastern gallery system, the smaller of the two. You know, roof runoff from a single family house, because it has a gable peak to it, you know, stuff doesn't sit on it. It continually blows off. But flat commercial roofs, it accumulates, or what the term bioaccumulate on the roof. And then when it rains, it all gets flushed off to the drains. So nitrogen is a limiting factor in tidal environments. You know, Mr. Bishop, the wetlands agent here, could easily, you know, provide the commission with more information on that. But nitrogen, excessive nitrogen levels kill tidal grasses within the tidal wetland areas. And as the tidal grasses die, the wetland areas become more prone to erosion due to storm events because there's nothing to hold the soil in place. Similarly, you know, while phosphorus is a, you know, a limiting factor in fresh water, you're in a brackish environment here. So there could be, you know, increased algae because of increased phosphorus loading. The larger underground gallery system, in front of it only has a hydrodynamic separator. This one is a downstream defender. I did look at the information the applicant submitted tonight. And if you read that, it flat out says this is based on lab data. Lab data is a controlled environment. It is not the real world. The real world data from both 20 years of monitoring at the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center, where actually Mr. Bishop and I both attended, although at widely different times, you know, has been monitoring stuff since '04. And what they find is that the online separators, which is proposed here, will remove about 29% of total suspended solids. That's a far cry from 80 to 85%. In addition, another document, the American Society of Civil Engineers BMP database, which has been an ongoing database pretty much run by Wright Water engineers out of Denver area. It's a compilation of monitoring data from across this country. So if I had a site where I was monitoring a separator and I had the inlet and outlet flow of concentrations, I can submit that. And they basically compile it in a very large database, which was just updated, I think, in 20 or 22. You can actually get the original data if you email them. But they show an average of 38% TSS removal. Now they're looking at both online to offline. is an overall average. But if you've got a 38 average and, that means probably an online separator is quite a bit less to get to 38.
Can you just explain? I think we got to break this down a little bit on
Okay, so-
TSS.
Total suspended solids is known as TSS. This is fine sediments. They're in the water. It's suspended. Think of coffee, coffee with cream. That's a good description for TSS. It's a brown colored water. It's not coarse sediments. It's stuff that's held in solution. And the way these separators, work is they swirl the water around with coarse sediments dropping out. But the fine sediment particles don't settle out. You need to, really let them sit somewhere before they'll settle out. So they pass through. They also do not do a very good job with metals or hydrocarbons, even though those are not listed in the DEP 2024 manual. DEP also says that this is a guidance document. It's the same language they used in 04. It's up to the design professional to design stormwater systems to address all of these non-point source pollutants. TSS, nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, metals and hydrocarbons. Just because it's not in a guidance document does not mean we simply ignore it, as far as that goes. So the underground gallery systems proposed by the applicant, when you look at the plans now, there's a manhole on the outlet side of them. And the outlet pipe from that is basically at the top of the gallery system. So they're going to fill up these gallery systems roughly 3 feet of water. They're going to be full all the time. Now in the 24 manual, which DEP put out, there's a line in there that says, well, if you provide the water quality volume, which is 1.3 inches of rain over your contributing impervious area, in a detention system, it assumes that the pollutants are being removed. I will tell you, based on my experience in the lid world and going to lid conferences, including one just a couple of years ago, that's not the way it works. Simply holding a volume does not equate to treatment. And actually, the 04 manual clearly said it has to be captured and treated. Those were the two operative words. So simply providing a volume in the underground Caltech systems do not do anything. Now,
Can I just interrupt you? So what you're saying is that at present, the capacity of those two sets of underground galleries is to capture first 1.3 inches of rain. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And your testimony is that in and of itself, capturing that volume does not equate to satisfactory treatment of the stormwater.
That is correct.
And why is that?
Because it has not been demonstrated that these galleries will infiltrate. While the applicant did do some additional test pits on the site, all of them show, actually one of them on the, I believe be the eastern end of the large gallery system has 70 inches of fill before they hit native soil. And the gallery system is located within this fill material. No infiltration tests were performed by the applicant at or below the bottom of these systems, which is a requirement of the 24 manual. Yet they do what's called a drawdown analysis. It's in the end of the stormwater report, where they use a rate of 1.02 inches, which was taken from table 10.2 of the manual for sandy loam. Well, all of their test pits show silt loam. A silt loam infiltration rate in table 10.2 is 0.26 inches per hour. So that's roughly 26% of what they're using. But the drawdown analysis is overly simplistic because what it's assuming is you have a bathtub and it's going to simply drain at a uniform rate, that whole volume. That's not how detention works. As it rains, water comes into the system and it depends on the intensity and duration of the rainfall event. And basically, water comes in, and if you have infiltration, it will infiltrate kind of as it's going. It does not simply fill up and then all disappear at once. But they have not demonstrated that these systems will infiltrate at all. And if they do infiltrate, yes, you can get treatment providing you're in an organic soil. That has not been proven by testing at this point.
Stop you for 1 minute.
And it's not been proven because there's been, I guess, not a sufficient test pits and
They have not done infiltration testing.
So if I can just,
infiltration testing. Okay.
so these galleries consist of, and I, just for the benefit of commission for the benefit of the public. These galleries basically consist of concrete chambers, correct? Concrete boxes.
There, one is concrete and the other is the plastic Cultex systems.
And they have either open or permeable bottoms. Is that correct?
They both have open bottoms and there's generally 6 inches of crushed stone underneath the bottom of each of them.
And what is the separation distance that you need to establish underneath those systems?
3 feet from the bottom of the gravel layer to seasonal groundwater. Again, with their test pits, they do not call out modeling or groundwater. I don't know if your engineering department witnessed the test holes at all, but you know, as it's written on the plan, you have to accept that they probably do have a 3-foot separation, but again, we don't know because I don't know if anybody witnessed.
so
So question for you though, because 3 foot, I think is what the best practices. Is that what Fairfield follows? Is that what's?
I don't think Fairfield has its own standard for that, so it would default back to the state manual.
So in theory, there's 3 feet there's analysis done that shows that there is at least 3 feet of vertical separation between the bottom of those chambers and groundwater. And that's to accommodate the infiltration of water underneath that chamber.
Correct. The infiltration chambers for stormwater function really almost identically to how a septic system works. Septic systems only require an 18-inch separation because we're talking a lot lower volumes of water, but you need to be able to infiltrate into an unsaturated zone. If you're too close to groundwater or you're in groundwater, there's no infiltration that will occur. So it's a separation to allow the water to be able to move into the soil, assuming you demonstrate that it can.
And in this instance, and can we get that site plan back up?
Yep.
So you're suggesting that those 2 systems and one receives stormwater, as I understand it, from what I'm going to call the diner portion of the property, and the other receives stormwater from the residential building. Is that
Yes.
your understanding?
Yes.
And what specifically are you referring to in terms of the lack of testing in those areas?
Well, there's no infiltration testing. Based on the plans that were submitted at 5:30 tonight, there are, I believe, 2 additional test pits in the smaller system on the left-hand side of the page, and 1 or 2 for the larger system. They had one on the larger system at the right-hand side, and there's one, I believe, on the left-hand side also. But again, infiltration tests per the manual are done at or below the bottom of your system. So if, say, the system is the bottom, I think one of them is at 8.5 feet, you know, you would be doing that test at 8.5 feet or 8 foot, you know, elevation, which is at the bottom, because that's the receiving layer of where infiltration may occur.
So the bottom of the chamber is at 8 feet, and then you would analyze the soil below 8 feet, correct?
Well, it's 8, yeah, it's at elevation 8. I think the smaller system is around elevation 11 or 12. So, you know, basically 4 feet below grade, you'd have to do an infiltration test because that's the receiving soil as far as that goes. You know, I did not look at some of the other documentation, but in the coastal area management analysis, the original one, you know, there's a substantial increase in impervious cover. And somewhere it does say, well, there's actually a reduction, but the increase is almost 50,000 square feet, which is 38% more than what you have today. And yes, the site has no stormwater treatment today. And quite honestly, any site built from the 60s, probably through the late 80s, doesn't have any water quality treatment because nobody paid attention to water quality. So, but we need to do better. And especially when you're increasing the impervious cover, you need to raise the bar to minimize the environmental impacts with this.
Would you just highlight paragraph 7 and 8 of your letter?
Yeah.
To the commission?
Comment number 7 talks about actually what the removal efficiencies are based on both UNH and the American Society of Civil Engineers. So a catch basin with 48-inch deep sumps will remove, well, actually, we'll remove 9% total suspended solids. I think the original proposal were 24-inch deep catch basins, which is only 5% of total suspended solids. It does nothing for metals or hydrocarbons. It may get about 6% phosphorus, 0% nitrogen. Online separators, total suspended solids are 29%, hydrocarbons 42, metals 26, nitrogen, phosphorus 0.
And so before we even get to the stormwater quality manual, is it your professional opinion that that is insufficient?
Yeah, the design is insufficient to address the non-point source pollutant loads. You will have increased discharges of these non-point source pollutants into the tidal resource.
And then we can talk about the best practices as they're identified in the stormwater manual in paragraph 8 of your report, correct?
Well, paragraph 8 states this is the DEP requirements for both for redevelopment. It's an 80% total suspended solid reduction, 50% phosphorus, and 30% nitrogen.
And just professionally, and Mr. Logan will get into this shortly, but can you comment on the proximity of these stormwater measures to the sort of coastal resources and what the impact of being that close to coastal resources is, although it's
more from Mr. Logan, but I believe that the closest point of the level spreaders, which are the discharge points, are 15 to 20 feet from the tidal boundary. The gallery systems are maybe 10 foot farther back from them. You know, a couple things I picked up in the coastal management report is it talked about, you know, permeable pavement and bioswales. I don't consider the green grass pavers being used as the emergency access to be permeable pavement. If you look at that cross section on their plan set, it's the grass PVC pavers with topsoil in them, but it's 2 layers of gravel underneath. So it's not providing any water quality treatment. They're also noting that you're compacting the underlying soil to 95% proctor density, which means you're not going to get any infiltration. The whole purpose of these systems is to infiltrate water. But that grass paver system isn't getting stormwater except the rainfall that falls on it. It's not getting water from the parking lot or anything else. It's, you know, it's not a treatment device. They also said there was
So just to stop you on that point. So what you're saying then is in order to create safe access, and Mr. Fino talked about the required capacity, even though that is sort of shown as green space and is shown as these pavers sitting on soil, you're saying there's stone and other material under it that is heavily compacted in order to create that load bearing capacity, correct?
Yes.
And by compacting it to that degree, it affects its permeability. And in your opinion, that should not count, that should count towards impermeable surface. Is that?
Yes, if you're compacting a native soil to 95% proctor density, you're compacting it to drive over and support heavy vehicles. You're not going to get any infiltration in that. It also talked that there was a bioswale, and when I read that, I scoured all the plan sheets. I didn't see a bioswale anywhere on the plans. And also they talk about, I think the applicant's attorney at the last meeting talked about runoff from some of the parking lot by the diner is going to sheet flow across the vegetated area. Well, if you look at the site plan, there's a 6-inch curb. So how does the water leap the curb to go over the grass filter strip? It doesn't. It's going to get picked up by the catch basins, go through the separator and go to the gallery system. So the vegetated buffer between the curb and the tidal resource, again, is not providing any type of treatment because the water is not being directed to it. So, there were also some other issues with, the erosion control plan. I did take a look at the plans tonight. There is a little bit longer narrative, but for a project of this magnitude, where we're removing, I think, 40,000 yards of rock, where's all the screening crushing equipment going to be placed? That's all part of the erosion control plan. And you don't have any idea where that operation is going to take place. That's not a small operation to, control the blasting dust and, crush it and then remove it from the site. You need to know where all that equipment is. The narrative needs to be much more detailed and a phasing plan that your staff can follow if this was to be approved. But this is a major project. This is not some single family house. And you need a very detailed plan, to protect the environment. Thank you.
Questions, Commissioner? Commissioner Randolph? That's what I'm waiting on.
So, Mr. Trinkus, thank you very much for your dedication to the environment, especially a sensitive site like this. It's close proximity, to a sensitive estuary, which has suffered a lot of damage. And I learned a ton. Okay, really, it was a great explanation of, I'll boil it down, the coffee filter. Because that's really what we're talking about is filtering material that goes through and controlling the velocity, volume, and clarity of the water that's going through. That's how my engineers explain it to me.
Yeah, I mean,
Volume, velocity, and clarity,
yeah,
right?
I mean, all of these pollutants, back in actually the early 2000s when Deep did the first manual, they made an assumption then that if you trap sediment, because most of these pollutants attach to sediment, you'd catch everything else. Unfortunately, in the past 20 years, that's been proven to be a false determination because while metals and hydrocarbons will attach to fine sediments, nutrients don't always do that and they stay in solution. So you have to have systems that can take up, nutrients that are in solution, and that is a vegetated system. The goal is to, under the MS4 permit, which Fairfield and every other town in the state is under, is a federal permit from EPA to focus and improve the water quality of runoff in every community. That's the goal of the MS4 permit. And, that's why we need to just quite honestly do a better job.
Sure. And so, the coffee filter, just to keep it simple, is we deal with these things a lot. It's probably the first time a lot of people have heard of it, but the coffee filter right now is not designed correctly.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's a fair assumption.
So could the coffee filter be redesigned? Is it feasible? Well, I don't know if you're a design engineer or you're just a water quality engineer. Are you
I'm a design engineer. I do land development work all the time. I've done many 8-30Gs, including several here in town.
You shouldn't admit that.
Well, there were smaller ones. But the bottom line is, yes, there are systems out here. We could be used to address all of these issues,
Okay.
but it's not my job to tell the
Right,
applicant.
right, but it is, so right now you've raised some concerns that I'm not gonna say you believe can be addressed, but you are of the opinion could be addressed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And then the ENS plan. When does an ENS plan usually, erosion and sedimentation control plan, which addresses the rock crushing and ensure dirt doesn't go off the site? When does the ENS plan, and I work out of state, when's the ENS plan submitted?
That is, in my 40+ years of experience, it's submitted in front of your commission. You have
At the zoning?
At the zoning stage. It's a detailed plan. It's
Yeah,
the 23 guidelines from
it's not at
DEP.
the building permit?
No, it's at this time because you approve it, if you approve it, then the applicant, if it's over 5 acres, has to get a general permit from DEP. And under the general permit, it has to be shown that the erosion plan and stormwater plan are in compliance with those two documents.
So the general permit, NEPTE's permit 102, where you're suggesting that the general ENS plan should be part of this submission?
Absolutely. Every project I do, it's part and parcel.
That's all I had.
Thank you.
Question,
Go ahead, Commissioner Braun.
looking at your report, number 2 on your report, Mr. Trinkos, site plans. Now, I don't think their new site plan, I don't know which infiltrator they're talking about, INF1. Is that the big one or the little one?
That is the little one, I believe. Yes.
It might have been addressed, but could you just explain what you mean by that paragraph? I couldn't understand. It has a conclusion and it has a lot of numbers. How do you get from the numbers to the conclusion?
According to the plans, the smaller detention system is called out at 9.4 feet. And then it says there's which the invert is the bottom of the system. That's the bottom of the gallery. Then it notes that there's a 6-inch overflow at elevation 13. Well, these are 30-inch or 3-foot high galleries. So 9.4 feet plus 3 feet is 12.4. So this overflow pipe is over half a foot above the top of the gallery. And there was no detail on the plan. There was no pipe. I don't know how it works. It was a note on the plan. So, these are 30-inch high galleries. So it actually was over a foot above the top of the gallery, which doesn't make sense from a stormwater standpoint. When you looked at the outlet manhole on the downhill side of the gallery system, that elevation was 9.3 feet. And there's a 10-foot piece of pipe at 1%. So that again verified the bottom of the gallery at 9.4. And at that time, I believe that there was no elevated outlet from the manhole. So basically water into the gallery would be leaving the gallery. And now the applicant in the current plan set submitted tonight, now in the manhole, the outlet pipe is elevated 3 feet up. So you've got the bottom of the gallery here, the outlet pipe is here. So now this gallery is going to fill up with water. And only when it gets above roughly 3 feet will you actually get a discharge to the level spreader. But again, simply providing that volume does not mean that treatment is occurring of the non-point source pollutants within the gallery system. And that's the same also for the larger gallery system.
Explain where treatment does occur. I tried to ask that originally of the applicant. What's your opinion on does treatment occur when it exits the bottom of the infiltrator? Does it occur when it's held in the infiltrators? There's no detention basin, right? Does it occur when it flows through a pipe to the level spreader, or when it overflows the system at the 100-year storm? Where does treatment occur in this system?
Well, in the smaller system, as the applicant has not demonstrated that it'll actually infiltrate at this point, I'm assuming that basically it's an underground bathtub. It's holding the water. And therefore you might get some settlement, of course, sediment within the bottom of the gallery if it sits there long enough. But in absence of a biological community, you're not going to get any treatment of the nutrients. And also metals and hydrocarbons will likely pass right through into the tidal resource. And while DEP does not require reductions in metals and hydrocarbons can be toxic to aquatic organisms at very low concentrations, especially when you have directly connect impervious cover, which we have here. So that's the concern, but the only treatment really is the catch basins, and that's minimal, and then the online separator, which is slightly above minimal in my professional opinion.
And you mentioned somewhere in the report that the pool area wouldn't be treated. That's not directed towards the drainage system. I don't know where it is, somewhere in the report.
There was some yard drains within the courtyard around the pool, but nothing that was grabbing the impervious cover. Again, not to say that, pool patios are high pollutant loads, but again, atmospheric deposition, nitrogen and phosphorus will occur on those areas. So in my professional opinion, all impervious cover needs to be treated to some degree, but you have to look at, the area. Obviously a pool patio is less than a parking lot, but it should have some degree of treatment, particularly in a coastal environment.
Wouldn't they, in a pool plaza area where people walk, would they use different types of substances for snow conditions and ice? Like, would that then potentially go downstream if it's not treated?
I would assume the pool area would be closed during our typical New England winter, so there would be no need to, do that. I mean, the other pollutant that we haven't really discussed yet is, de-icing agents, which unfortunately are replacing simply using sand for traction on roadways. Whether you put down the brines or you put down the rock salt, the chloride aspect of the de-icing agents does not go away. There is no treatment system out there that is removing chlorides. The only way to minimize chloride impact is, quite honestly, to not use it or use one of the magnesium acetates, which is a carbon-based compound where it will break down in the environment. Chloride impacts can be acute and toxic. I will tell you the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center in Durham is in the watershed of the Great Bay. And even though they're not right on the Great Bay with their research facility, they have chronic high chloride levels in the Great Bay. And in some winters, they go to acute because of all the roads that discharge to it. And again, the chlorides stay in the water column. They stay in the soil. When you plow slush up against vegetation or onto vegetation, it will kill the vegetation. You can drive up Route 8 from Waterbury, up north, and you'll see white pines that are just turning brown because of the plows throwing the slush onto them. So chlorides are a major environmental issue, and unfortunately, the only way to minimize that is simply not to use them.
Thank you.
One brief question.
Do you have a question, Tom?
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Commissioner Frisella, go ahead.
I think this should be quick. So you, in your executive summary, you indicated that the stormwater management system doesn't comply with the deep water quality manual, and that the erosion control plan isn't in compliance with the deep 2024 guidelines. And then you have, I think, like 27 specific points related to those and some other things. If the systems were designed and the plans were designed in compliance with the 2024 manual and guidelines, to what extent would the fuller list of the 27 or so specific points be addressed? Mostly, in part?
I would have to see revised plans to give you any kind of opinion on that.
Okay, so it's not, so your concerns that you articulated in the fuller list may go beyond just meeting the requirements of these guidelines.
Commissioner Randolph.
Yeah, just a quick question. So we draw Venn diagrams. So we try to satisfy different risk factors. One of the risk factors being fire, another risk factor being quality of life, where building setbacks are, another risk factor being the water. You mentioned, which was something I'd not heard before, that grasscrete, I call it grasscrete, no longer qualifies as an impermeable surface, because that is not, is that according to state of Connecticut guidelines? Who disqualified grasscrete as an impermeable
We're
surface?
talking about grass pavers, right?
Yeah, grass
Pavers, but yeah, grass pavers.
That's fine, just
Because the underlying base is being compacted to an impermeable level. I will give you an example. Artificial turf fields, everybody thinks they're equivalent to grass. They are not. They are considered impervious because there is no infiltration associated with them. If you have infiltration, the surface would be considered permeable. But if there is no infiltration and loss of runoff, that's the very definition of an impermeable surface.
I have a question.
Wouldn't, in that example, wouldn't it flood?
Well, let him finish, yeah.
You know, I understand your analogy with artificial turf, but my understanding is that grass pavers, as specified and installed in many cities, qualify as impermeable surface. Has that been revised?
Permeable.
It's permeable, sorry. Yeah.
Again, it depends on the base material. If you had the pavers and you had the two layers of gravel as proposed by the applicant simply on the native soil, and you were not compacting the native soil, then yes, it would be considered a permeable surface because you're not compacting the underlying soil. But once you compact the underlying soil.
So your question is the way it's currently specified, but you're not disqualifying grass pavers entirely.
Oh, no, not
Okay,
at all.
I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. So it's the specification as on the drawing
Correct.
currently doesn't have the permeability that would be optimal.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Ford.
I think you cleared it up, that answer.
Any further? For Mr. Trinkus,
One question about snow.
go ahead.
Were your questions answered about snow removal location? And do you have a thought on where it should be if they didn't answer it yet in the revised plans?
I did not have enough time because I had a prior meeting to go on Zoom to look at snow removal, but stockpiled snow also has to be located on the site so that when it melts, it goes through whatever treatment system you have. Snow melt can have extremely high pollutant loads because basically it's a concentrated pile of frozen water. And a number of years ago, I want to say 13, we had the blizzards in Boston. They found the pollutant loads, metals and hydrocarbons coming off a snow pile were just like off the charts, because it melts from the bottom. But it's very ugly from a stormwater perspective. So that's why the piles have to be located where they will go through some degree of treatment. Otherwise, you have a significant discharge to any environment.
And one other question about manholes. When there's a manhole shown and it's fairly close my concern is that there's a lot of stuff being done very close to the tidal wetland. When you maintain it or construct it, even with sedimentation controls, is there a concern that you're just so close to the wetland, like 15 feet away in some instances? And then they have to, of course, maintain it throughout the lifetime of the structure.
The concern with installing a drainage structure in close proximity to tidal wetlands is generally that as you dig a fairly deep hole to put it in, you may hit the groundwater table. So you should have provisions for handling the groundwater, i.e. pumping it, so that you can install the drainage structure in a dry environment. Once it's installed and sealed, maintenance is done from the inside, so it wouldn't really cause any issues. But during construction would be the time of concern, simply because you may hit, a tidal, groundwater table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, obviously, Mr. Trinkus will review the materials, so you may see him again, but at this point, I'd like to call on George Logan of Lima Ecological Services, and he'll be appearing online.
I am here.
So just for the commission, I had asked Mr. Logan to hold up on preparing his report and analysis until the questions that I had submitted were responded to, but not having seen them, I had asked him to have his report, finish his report. And again, this is based on the application as it appeared last week. And I presume, Mr. Logan, you haven't had a chance to review the new submissions by the applicant?
Maybe I've spent 10 minutes that I had. Yes, that's about it.
Fair enough. Just briefly for the record, would you, I did submit Mr. Logan's CV today. Would you just briefly describe your education, training, and experience?
Certainly. So again, thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be before any commission. And so my qualifications, well, I do hold a master's degree in natural resources science with concentration in wildlife and conservation biology. I've been in the field about the same time that Mr. Trinkus is, since 1988. And I hold several certifications as a soil scientist, as a professional wetland scientist. I'm a senior ecologist certified through the Ecological Society of America. And I also have an associate wildlife certification through the Wildlife Society. And I guess my title here in my company is principal environmental scientist with all the underlying certifications that I just mentioned.
Once again, I'd refer the commission to Mr. Logan's CV. So, Mr. Logan, can you just briefly review what you were tasked with doing with respect to this application?
Certainly, and what I'll try to do is not go through the my entire report in any great detail. I'll try to concentrate on a few things. I did listen with great interest to what Mr. Trinkus had to say, and I must say that he's absolutely right. Again, I'm not a design engineer, but as a scientist, I also review the plans in regard to stormwater and how the resource might be protected or not. And so I'll make a few comments along that line. But so I've reviewed the plans as before today. So I did a little bit of a look-see through a few things that I had not seen, which had not been submitted or missing from the plan, or that I had not, they were not in my in what I've been given. So let's take them once in the.
By the way, you had an opportunity to view and inspect the coastal resources.
I did. So I did myself and my colleague, who's also a signatory of our review letter, and she's similarly qualified. She's more leans towards plant materials and invasive species and the like, and I lean more towards wildlife. So we did look at the resource. We also accessed the resource from a neighboring property. Got down to the actual resource, and you can see in my report there are a few pictures that indicate that. So one of the things that's probably the primary focus of, or two primary focuses of my my review. One is obviously how do we protect the resource, the functions and values that the resource provides. Looking at also wildlife, looking at the fact that this system is considered critical habitat, that it does potentially have a series of listed species, endangered, threatened, special concern, which have been now identified, and some discussion has been put forth with regard to those species that did not occur before. Although I did listen to the good portion of the video of the February 25th, 2025 town meeting before you. And what I found was that the buffer, the proposed buffer, you know, we call it, the calling a wetland buffer planting, in my view, is totally inadequate in order to protect the resource. So here's something that's interesting. So Mr. Trinkos a little earlier discussed of how with a development project or even a redevelopment project that we now have to carefully look at to see if there's compliance with new standards from the 2024 manual, for instance, other scientific literature. And that's expected that we would do that in order to protect the environment with the new standards, the new information, the new understanding that we have as far as water quality is concerned. But also in the same way, the protection of the tidal resources and the functions and values that they provide must also adhere to the more recent scientific-based understanding of what we need as far as a robust wetland buffer. And what I've done as part of my report, I've attached one particular document that the Connecticut DEP has put out in regard to wetland buffer guidance for tidal systems. And also what I provided is sort of a white paper that has been sort of a, should we say, an active ongoing document that we revise from time to time, that myself and Ms. Godwell, my collaborator in this analysis, has put together on the scientific basis for providing wetland and watercourse buffers, which also applies obviously to tidal systems. So that's an enclosure. That's a 20+ page document that's also been submitted into the record. So as you can understand, this is something that I'm very familiar with. I've been, for years and years, I've been going through the literature. As a matter of fact, many years ago, the Connecticut DEP commissioned the company that I used to work for to put together an understanding of buffers and wetlands and watercourses.
Mr. Logan and Attorney Green, can we, I think we can get a little more targeted with what his observations and his conclusions are.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to establish that I am an expert with regard to wetland buffers.
Thank you.
So I'll
Fair
stop
enough.
here with that. So we looked at the CAM report, and we found that there's really a very rudimentary description of the coastal resources in that CAM report, and any reports is provided, including the intertidal marsh, the mudflats, and the tidal creek. We don't even have any photographs, which tends to tell me that there has not been really much survey of the actual resources, maybe just a cursory one at the edge. The CAM report.
Does that lead you to conclude that the investigation was inadequate?
Absolutely. I mean, my own experience, if I'm looking at a coastal resource, I need to survey the resource and provide sufficient information to show a commission or a reviewer that I've looked at this very carefully. The CAM report also refers to a comprehensive long-term maintenance and monitoring plan. I have not found that. It was not in the list of application materials. I did not see it today. Maybe it's somewhere that I haven't seen it, but I will be very interested to see that. There had not until today been specific discussion on or surveys for the listed species. I did attach, and I think it's been attached to other documents of the kinetic and NTDB assessment to discuss the potential effects upon them and the proposed development. That's something that's going to be required because I believe that this application, this proposal will also have to attain a general permit from Connecticut DEP because there's more than 5 acres of land which is being disturbed. And here's something that I think you old folks have all listened to, and I think it's a very valid point of how the town of Fairfield, with I'm sure grants, is involved in a $5.5 million project to reconstruct the tie gates at Ash Creek at Riverside Drive. We went and looked at those. And this project will not only provide flood control, but also, and this is as far as the resource is concerned, would allow for better flushing. So as someone before me, I think, forget her name, from Ash Creek Conservation spoke about how this is going to increase or should increase the salinity, which is then allow for colonization of additional tidal marsh species, potentially including the ones that are listed that we talked about. And therefore, in view of this tremendous capital expenditure and effort and resource enhancement, which we expect from this, the subject redevelopment should also be analyzed for its potential to impact the enhanced future resources, not just what's there today. Mr. Trinkhaus did speak eloquently about the fact that nitrogen is a limiting factor. He did talk the fact that we need to also look at other constituents of stormwater, metals, for instance. One of the things that people don't rarely understand is that they think of metals as something that's particular, which is going to be settled out, but a significant portion of what we consider the toxic metals like cadmium, chromium, copper, nickel, and zinc are in soluble forms. And some of them, anywhere from 25% to 70%, are in soluble forms. And those go right through systems such as this, including infiltration systems. So you need additional best management practices to deal with this. The other thing that was interesting, and I did see that the applicant had provided a little bit of a documentation on the hydrodynamic separator, and I think Mr. Trinkhaus is absolutely correct that you need to look not at lab-based data, but you need to look at real data. One of the things that's also not readily understood is that when you talk about TSS, or total suspended solids, and you look at what was provided by the applicant, they looked at the 50 micron particle, and they said, okay, that's was removed with 80% of it during certain flow regimes, and that's based on lab. But in reality, what we find out is that a recent study was done in 2024, for instance, and I could reference that at some point if you'd like. I didn't put it in my report. What they found out was that when you look at the 50 micron particle, that for at least 40% of TSS particles are less than that, up to 60% for roads, and for mixed land uses, 60% is less than 50 microns. And what happens is, as you probably realize, is that the reason that we've used TSS as sort of a surrogate of removal is because the particles or pollutants absorb to particles. They have this chemical and hydrochemical reaction where they absorb. And so if you take out this TSS, then the concomitant removal of pollutants is expected to be on the higher side. But the problem is that even if we were remove 80%, which I don't think we would remove with this particular hydrodynamic separator, The 20% that's left is associated with more than 50% of the actual pollution. And that's not even talking about the soluble forms. What drives loading is movements of vehicles. So it's axle miles. So the more vehicles you have, the more impervious surfaces you have, the higher you're loading of pollutants. We talked about the fact that there was no deep test pits. Again, that will be a consideration that hopefully we get some answers on that. We looked at, and again, in the report, I provided a little more information on the actual resource and some photographs. I won't bother you with that at this point. We review the landscaping plan because that has been touted.
Mr. Logan, can I interrupt you for one moment here?
Absolutely.
Just to help the commission get to sort of the conclusions on some of these items. So in your practice, have you been consulted on the design of stormwater treatment systems?
Yes, I have.
In terms of their impact?
Not specifically in the design, but on how effective they might be in treating stormwater.
Okay, so you heard Mr. Trinkus's testimony, correct?
Correct.
And you've seen his report, correct?
I have.
And I know you touched on it in your presentation. So in your professional opinion, the system that is proposed, the stormwater detention and treatment, do you concur with Mr. Trinkus's conclusion that they are inadequate to treat TSS and the various metals and other compounds that he identified?
I absolutely do.
And can you just highlight for the commission what the impact of the discharge of inadequately treated stormwater that would be presented by this site on this tidal wetland specifically, and just highlight some bullet points on what the impacts would be on this and the specific resources impacted?
Correct. So we have a resource that's vegetated, and we have resources that are non-vegetated. So we have a creek, we have mud flats, and we have a Phragmites marsh with some other vegetation along the fringe. Nitrogen is going to be counteractive to what the tidal gate extra flushing would be accomplishing, because nitrogen, Phragmites likes nitrogen, but it also affects the microbiology. So all the little critters that live, put it colloquially, within the root systems and in the mud that the Phragmites is coming in, can be impacted by not only the nitrogen but also the toxic metals. And I think Mr. Trinkos correctly said that there's toxicity to metals that are at very low concentrations. So
it will adversely impact native species existing in that creek, correct?
Right, not only flora, but also more importantly, fauna.
And
fauna that are part of the food chain for the higher animals.
And at the same time, it will promote the spread and growth of invasive species.
It will do that. It will increase the Phragmites and counteract what the floodgates will be doing by increasing the salinity. And of course, once you start affecting the food chain at the lowest levels of the microbiota, then of course you affect the other wildlife that might be using. And the problem with wildlife, especially some of the like we've seen all kinds of fauna, avians utilizing this or expected to utilize this system, is you have a bioaccumulation. So they come in and they take the forage of the microbiota, the little crabs, etc. And so these toxics bioaccumulate to these birds, this higher taxa, and of course that's degrades them and causes harm to them also.
Okay, and you on page 5 of your plan, you you reviewed the landscaping plan. Is that correct?
That is correct. And both myself and Ms. Godwa, we don't think it's an adequate plan. I can talk about the fact that I've made a recommendation here that at a minimum there should be a 50-foot buffer enhancement. Again, more than what's there today in order to protect the resource from this particular density of development and intensity of development.
And just so we're clear, the impacts would be both, what are the concerns? I take it, actually, light is maybe one of them, is that correct?
Light's one of them, noise is them, visual, so auditory and visual disturbance. The more buffer you have, in this particular case, is not just for water quality, from air quality, but also from a screen to the wildlife that use that want some of these more secretive species. They don't like to see people moving back and forth, so they would like to be buffered. And the more that happens, the better the resource is functioning with respect to the aquatic wildlife that use that area. So that's clearly something that's recommended by DEP, and I included that in my attachment and also in my own personal scientific research over many years.
Also as a sound buffer as well for activities on the site.
Absolutely.
And I know that you, on page 7 of your report, you speak to, based on your inspection of the site, you didn't feel that the applicant had adequately inspected and analyzed the receiving resource being, again, flora and fauna in the tidal wetland and waterway, correct?
That is correct. I find that unfortunately lacking to a great extent.
So I think the high level takeaway for the commission is that you felt is that it's your opinion based on the report that the applicant has not once again done an adequate analysis and reporting in a manner that would allow this commission to sort of assess the true impacts and consequences on the tidal resources. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's a double thing. One, you don't have enough data to evaluate the resource, its functions and values, its sensitivity, its productivity. On the other hand, you have strategies or mitigative strategies that are inadequate in order to protect those functions and values. So it's a dual thing that comes together.
Now, let me ask you this question. As you're aware, there's been a petition to intervene pursuant to section 22A19 of the Connecticut General Statutes, correct?
Yeah. I have seen that, yes.
And based upon your review of the materials that, and I understand that it's your position that there's inadequate reporting, but based on what you have seen, and based on the testimony of Mr. Trinkus, the resulting lack of adequate stormwater treatment, the proximity of the site and the stormwater treatment to the tidal resources, is it your opinion that as the site is presently proposed to be developed and based upon the stormwater system and based on the information you do have, is it your opinion that let's just go with water within the tidal wetland will be polluted by virtue of the proposed activity?
I believe that is the case.
And that is both from TSS and from suspended compounds such as metals and the like.
A lot of the soluble ones are going to be the issue also, not just the suspended solids.
Okay. I presume, I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't know. Are there other sort of higher level points that I've missed?
No, I think that's it. I mean, one thing that I need to say is that we did take a look at the invasive management survey that was submitted this afternoon, and we find that needs to be reviewed carefully. One of the things that I don't like about it, I mean, it's not very specific as far where any particular infestations are. It just talks about the presence. But one thing they are proposing there, and I haven't looked at it very, very carefully, is to eliminate or reduce Phragmites. I don't think that's a good idea at all, because right now that Phragmites is providing ecological services, as I described before. What we want to do is to allow the additional salinity that's going to come from these gates to do the job gradually instead of going in there and getting rid of Phragmites, which is providing services. And of course, the other thing that I did not like at all is the landscaping plan. I think that's wholly inadequate as far as I'm concerned. And certainly look at my report. I don't want to get into any detail as to why. I think some of these things have already been mentioned by others. We have some additional detail of why that landscape plan is really not native and is not, doesn't really look at what you would do in a coastal zone to increase and enhance a buffer.
All right, so let me ask you, in concluding, sort of a higher level question. As you're aware, the commission is dealing with an application to amend its zoning regulations to allow a significantly more intense and I'll say dense use of the site. You're aware of that, correct?
Of course, yes.
And you're aware that this involves once again, 110 room hotel, a 250 unit residential structure, a restaurant, and the like. You're aware of all that, correct?
Of course.
And in your professional opinion, would a smaller, less dense, less intense use of the property with proper measures, once again, for stormwater treatment, landscaping, perhaps lower structures and the like, cause almost by any measure, if properly done, a less adverse impact on the resources that you've inspected?
Absolutely. I can see a development happening here that's done properly, taking into account the sensitivity of the resource, its proximity, and some of the unusual situations in this particular site, such as the fact that there used to be tidal wetlands that had been filled. And so you have who knows what kind of fill sitting on top of those old wetlands. I looked at the 1934 aerial photograph. So yes, I can see an alternative that can take all these things into consideration and provide a much higher level of protection to the resource.
So I know the commission may have questions, but I'll just say, obviously, we once again need an opportunity to review the new materials. Mr. Logan has identified a number of infirmities and sort of lack of information in the plans. And so you may, once again, you may see Mr. Logan again to address those.
Yeah, we'll see where we are. Like I said, I think you'll have time in between this hearing and next, so we'll see where we are at the end of this. Questions for Mr. Logan? Go ahead. Priscilla and then Randolph.
I don't think you really touched on this in what you've said this evening, but in your report, which is very extensive, you also talked about, you sort of alluded to this a minute ago when you talked about the insufficient landscaping plan. And it's in your report, what you described sounded like you were saying, and tell me if this is accurate, that the proposed plan is really lacking in proper native species, that you described a shrub dominated landscaping plan where you'd recommend instead one that was more tree dominated. And you described something that sounded to be like a more natural scenario as opposed to a sort of manicured scenario, which is in the plan as currently proposed. So putting aside the stormwater part of this and focusing more on the landscaping plan, sounds to me like you're recommending a revised plan that moves much more toward a natural landscape versus what's been proposed.
So there's two issues. One is quality. So something that's, like you said, is more natural and self-sustaining rather than something, because it has to be self-sustaining. You can't be in it all the time and, monitoring it. You want it to point it in the right direction and let it go. maybe with some monitoring now and then. So that's the quality part, but also the quantity. I don't think it's enough of a buffer to protect this particular resource.
Yep.
Commissioner Randolph.
Mr. Grisillo anticipated a couple of my questions. So you've suggested that the buffer needs to be larger. And that the types of trees planted need to be different. A couple of other questions. You said that the invasive management, the invasive management plan needs to be improved. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. And again, I haven't gone into any great detail, but yes, on a high level, that's some of the things that I saw.
Yeah, I'm
But
just trying to
there's
recap your main points here. And that sounds like it's something that would be, right now, it's absent that you're requesting be provided. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
You're asking that the invasive management plan be provided?
It was provided today. But my review of it shows that it's inadequate in not only describing what's there, but what's going to happen in the future.
In terms of the removal of Phragmites was one example.
Phragmites was not something that removal was not something that I would recommend.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify your points here, so thank you for that. And then if a NEPD's deep general permit was issued, would that address the water quality plans? The water quality issues you've raised?
Not necessarily. Again, as a science person looking at water quality, I think it's a good start. The 2024 is a good start. But again, it's a guidance document, like Mr. Trinko says, so you have to match the resource sensitivity to what you need to do. So a good starting part is your 2024, but then you have to look at some other things in order to be able to be protective. So in my experience, and Mr. Trinko's probably has more experience in this, quite often the general permit kind of glosses over some things, and as long as some of the boxes are hit, as far as, for instance, the water quality volume and the infiltration portion, etc., they will sign off. But I think in this particular case, we have sort of an unusual situation with a sensitive resource, and so I would go a step further in specifying specific best management practices that would fit the situation in order to protect the resource.
So just to clarify the point, so issuance of the general permit is what's required under statute. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so you're asking that in addition to complying with the state regulations, that best management practices BMPs be implemented.
Right, correct.
Well, I think he's also suggesting that those permits don't necessarily deal with some of the issues that have been identified.
That's what I'm trying to say, right? So you have to
Nothing was
tailor your system to the sensitivity of the resource, and you use the 2024 manual as a good starting place.
But just to clarify, the regulations are established by the state, and general permit determines whether the project complies with the regulations. But Mr. Logan and Mr. Trinkus are suggesting that we go beyond the regulations as a prudent practice, but not necessarily a practice to meet the state regulations.
That's what I'm saying, is that the manual looks at more of the common denominator, sort of the average situation. Here we have something that's sort of in the extreme. It's a little different from your common, using the bell curve, if you will. We're kind of on one side or the other.
Okay. Further questions for Mr. Logan?
Question.
Go ahead.
Could you explain general permit versus, I guess, specific or individual permit? Is a general permit more or less site specific in terms of how it gets issued by DEP.
All the general permits are in part site specific. Obviously, there's no, the individual permits come for special situations, and Mr. Trinkos can speak to that, like industrial. Industrial general permits are a little more specific, and sometimes they go into an individual thing where they have specific things you have to do over and above what we're looking at here. But there isn't general permits, the sole permit that's required for anything that's above 5 acres of disturbance of land.
And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the One Nature report that was done by the Ash Creek Conservation Association, or provided to them, I guess. They recommended a 100-foot setback. Would that be better than the 50? I mean, 50, would that be the minimum that you would want?
Well, so I looked at the information that's available, and I have a lot of it too, and I looked at the guidance that DEP provided for buffer guidance for tidal wetlands. And they noted that the Yale study showed that buffers that are protective, generally of aquatic systems, of aquatic wildlife, are between 94 feet and 164. There's probably meters that are translated to feet. So I think my recommendation of 50 is more in view of the resource. I wouldn't go with 100. I would go with 50, but the 50, I would put it from the top of the slope out and not include the slope, which is very steep and it doesn't really provide much buffering under existing conditions.
Oh, from the top of the slope towards the building, you mean?
That's right. From the brow, if you will, of the slope backwards, 50 feet would be sort of what I would consider adequate for not only what's there now, but for the enhanced condition that's going to be coming in the years to come.
The slope would be part of the buffer also, but it would create additional feet beyond the 50 feet then.
Right. So in
Okay.
some cases, it will be 75 feet. In some places, it might be 80. In some places, it'd be a little less.
And you mentioned also that in their CAM review, they left out intertidal flats. Is that why should that be included, and why do you think it was left out?
I'm not sure. It's probably just an error. I mean, everyone knows that a big part of the system is the tidal flats, because those are the ones that are foraging areas for many wildlife.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're good with Mr. Logan.
I have no further consultants. So what I would propose is to allow us an opportunity to review the new materials, and where necessary, either we'll submit a short writing by our consultants. And if necessary, they can be available for questions. I would propose an opportunity to address the commission relatively briefly with sort of.
I don't think we're gonna, I mean, it's 9:30 now, despite what that clock says, it's 9:30. So I'm gonna suspect when I turn to the public in person and remote, we're not gonna get through the remaining public. So I suspect it might be easy. I guess it depends on what you find. I suspect it would be easier for writings, for responsive writings. And then maybe a quick summary from you. I don't think we need to have a full presentation, I think unless something major comes up. I'm not gonna hold you to it, I guess. I guess it depends, but I don't think public comment is going to end tonight.
So I'll suspend at this point, and I certainly respect the time of the commission.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Want to see this public hearing closed.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, so I think responsive writings would be better than another presentation from your end and your consultant's end. Should there be something, maybe we'll talk about it next time.
Thank you once again to the commission for your patience.
Thank you.
Attention.
Members of the public, yeah, I know you're up next.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. I apologize. I'm still just digesting what Mr. Logan was saying. Will there be opportunity to ask further questions tonight, or I'm not sure if this hearing will be continued?
I just went over that. I
I just want to clarify, okay?
I suspect that will be, I mean, if you have questions now for Mr. Logan, fine. If there's something
Well,
that
I
comes up,
have to digest some information, so
we all
I'll,
do. Yeah. I mean, I suspect the public comment will remain open until next time, so.
Chairman Noonan, sorry, just so that we don't end up sort of playing this game for multiple weeks, if we could maybe have Attorney Green provide any written comments, let's say at least a day before the next hearing, so that we don't come and, you know. So we can
Really?
move forward.
I mean, well, you both did it. Point well taken. To the extent that you can, it would be helpful for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on one second.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Under public comment.
Well, interesting point. I'm happy to do that. But I take it, just to stop the cycle, I take it the applicant is gonna stop submitting at this point as well.
He said he had at least 2 answers to those memo questions that he's still waiting on, still waiting to get to you. I mean, I don't think there's anything that you're expecting to submit between now and next time, right? Those 2 answers, I remember you saying.
No, unless we submit something from the new experts that we heard tonight, which again, we'll get those in advance if we do, but I mean, it's rebuttal was rebuttal.
Yeah.
But yes, we won't file anything within a day of next Tuesday.
Okay, fair.
Is it next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday? Next Tuesday. Weekly high.
It's me too. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Agate of 530 Riverside Drive. I have a little presentation.
Feel
I'm
free to
no
sit or stand,
expert.
whatever you like.
No, I'm not an expert in any way. I just want to show you.
Hear her properly back there?
I think
Ma'am.
so. Can everyone hear me?
Can we just,
Oh, okay.
the microphone
Can you
seems
hear
to
me?
help.
Better?
You're reading
Okay.
this from the commission.
I'm sorry. Okay. And yeah, my first time here. I never wanted to be here ever, but I have to. I live across, as you can see. There's the circle diner behind my house. As you can see, I have a lovely backyard and it's completely shielded, almost completely in the summer. Except for last summer, they were cutting down some trees, probably knowing they were doing this. You can go ahead to the next slide. The reason I really came here today was because something really bothered me that was said. It said in the original, it said there were only 6 houses impacted. And mine wasn't one of them, and nobody on Riverside Drive was one of them. And obviously, this is going to have a huge impact on me, especially when they cut down all those trees. So here are some great views. You can go to the next slide. You see that little cardinal. I love my little cardinals that come in, and I'm really worried that they won't be coming anymore. I heard the other day, I almost died, that our property values might go up. I mean, can you tell me how that's going to happen? So, you know, I have lost sleep. I know everybody's working really hard. I'm up at night stressing out about this. This is my children's inheritance, and somebody can just go in there and take it all away. So I enjoy frequent visits from wildlife. Oh, yeah, I told you that. They already started cutting the trees down last summer. And okay, so I feel really bad about my situation, but then when I heard about the people on Shoreham Village, I could seriously cry for them. Just looking at the model, the 3D model, and what their views are gonna be and the impact and the jackhammering, just horrible. Anyway, okay, go to the next slide. Oh, my daughter graduation picture. Okay, go ahead. You can skip this one, that's what I said. Now, of course, everybody knows that the traffic is extremely dangerous. These are real pictures. And to me, it's even insane that anyone would consider building there, but here we are today. The traffic assessment that was done was taken at 7:30 to AM in June. Or 7:30, 8:30. I think it should be 7 to 8 AM in September. That would be a better evaluation of the traffic. The cars that are patiently supposed to wait to come out, where are they waiting? Are they waiting in the parking garage all lined up? Will they be patient or are they gonna jet out into the oncoming traffic? Or maybe they're gonna take a right, like we talked about tonight, and go through our neighborhoods and then endanger the children and the dogs. We can go to the next slide. The next one. Okay. Stormwater management, as we heard tonight, was not efficient. I've been through Sandy and Irene. You see although the two on the right are admittedly not in our area, they are in Fairfield, but I was around, maybe not everybody was, but the police going down the road with their police boat and the flooding. So we should be planning for worst case scenario, not minimal. I know my neighbor just a few doors down got 5 feet of water in her basement. And I was lucky, I only got a drop, but now who knows what I'll get. Okay, next slide. This is really, really, really bothersome to me. I do not believe personally that we have a right to completely disrupt and harm the wildlife. As you heard from the Ash Creek Association, you see at the website up there, we should be looking to them on guidelines, if we can do this or not. They are working with Bridgeport and Fairfield, are working on this, and we need to respect the work that they're doing and look to them for advice. So another thing is I'm sometimes on construction sites for my job, and all day long. How is the wildlife gonna deal with that? The birds cannot communicate with each other if they cannot hear each other. We've talked about the light pollution control, the runoff concerns. Pesticides and fertilizers were slightly brought up. Are they going to use Roundup? The flooding of the salt levels, we talked about changing the ecosystem. There'll be more mosquitoes because we're going to be disrupting the bats and the dragonflies, which the dragonflies are awesome. Okay, next. So in summary, this project is tremendous, very rude, inconsiderate of the surrounding neighborhood, and dangerous to the humans and wildlife. Any letters of support that were done in the beginning should not be counted because they changed the facade. Any variances to take into consideration to the wildlife should be signed off by the Joint Commission of Fairfield and Bridgeport, along with the Ash Creek Association. Better road safety analysis needs to be done. The health department must sign off on test holes and drainage proposals. Had a situation at my job where someone wanted to put in just a sport court. They couldn't do it in the backyard. Originally, the first test hole looked good, but when the three that were supposed to be there together, the engineer, the health department, and the excavator, they found out, no, couldn't do it. Have to put it in the front yard. So this is information we need. In short, this is way too big, the wrong location, and there's critical information that's missing. And I sound mad. I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the builders. I'm mad at the whole proposal. I'm trusting you. Very happy. I appreciate the fact that you give your time, and I'm counting on you. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Larry Villano, and I moved back to Connecticut 42 years ago.
Feel free to sit too if you like. It's your call.
Whatever. Raised our kids here. I've really enjoyed being here, and lots of friends, interests. I have an office 2 days a week here. The rest of the time I work in an office in New Haven, and we'd like to stay here. But as we age, I just wanted to present one perspective that it doesn't seem to us like there's a lot of options for seniors. Somewhere that's near town, somewhere that's easy access to services. And that's sort of what we're looking for. And there isn't a lot available. And so we think there need to be increased options for seniors, just presenting that perspective. And from my view, not a professional developer or anything like that, it seems like the Circle Hotel developments are some options, you know, walkable to things when we're no longer driving. And I just wanted to present that perspective to people. Thank you. Boy, this is the first time I've been with the commission. I see how hard you work. Thank you for all that.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jim Ruane, and I've been living in Fairfield for many years. I want to take this opportunity first to commend the developer, the owner, Mr. Gormley, in regard to this project, because I think it's going to be a very vast improvement to the city, for the town of Fairfield. I only want to make a couple of brief remarks. First, in terms of the landscaping, I think it will be certainly an improvement to the appearance in the area of that area of Fairfield, even if improved as suggested by the previous experts. Secondly, I want to point out that obviously it will be an improvement to the tax base of the town of Fairfield, which would be obviously for all of us and a good thing to have the tax base be expanded. And following up, my third point is very simple. Following up on the previous speaker, he speaks about seniors and the availability of places to live so that he can live and enjoy Fairfield. Because my understanding is, I could be corrected, that this will provide for approximately 30 units of affordable housing, rental housing and whatever, for seniors who are empty nesters or recent college graduates. So that's an improvement also, because I submit that the town of Fairfield could absolutely use more of living facilities such as that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any member of the public in person wish to be heard? Ma'am, come on up. And again, to those who are joining remotely, if you can please sign in the chat, that's going to be our kind of list of order. It's not the right word, but.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Lori Hashizumi from 1059 Pequot Avenue. I've lived in Fairfield for 34 years. I have a background in public policy, economic development, and affordable housing finance. I support this project because the concept fits in with the ideals of a walkable community, where one doesn't need to get into a car to do routine activities. The proposed hotel and apartments, I was here February 25th, saw the plan, so I think I'm commenting on what's current. I think it's a very attractive look. And I think it will provide the town of Fairfield with much needed housing, a place to send relatives and friends from out of town who need a place to stay. It'll upgrade sidewalks and provide a walking continuation to the Black Rock community and Old Post Road area. So, and also a nice walking trail, although I'm hearing things about impervious parking, grass parking. It will also improve for Fairfield and increase tax base and an upscale look to a neglected piece of property. That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Michael Moran. I'm a townie, born here, grew up here in Fairfield, and have seen most of the changes that have gone on in the town. And I have a slightly different perspective from an entertainment perspective. The venues that have been established now in town are tremendous, and they form a very nice base. And from my standpoint, not only is this an improvement from the other points that the people have made, but it will be potentially another place for a music venue. Some little self-interest, I'm a musician, and I think it would fill a gap in the venues that are out there. It'd be a club and a supper club, something that is not available now. So from that perspective, with everything else added into it, I think it's be a great amenity for the town.
Thank you. Any member of the public in person wish to be heard? Or can I turn to the people joining us remotely? Not the last call, well, not the last chance, but not seeing anybody. Let's turn to those remotely.
Okay, so we have Sarah Newland first, followed by Stephen Rosato. I have about 9 people.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's 9:48, but let's see how far we get with Miss Newland. And is Attorney Green out there? Is that who I see? Oh, there you are. I'm sorry, I thought he was out there. I have something I forgot to bring up, but maybe we'll do that at the end. So Miss Newland, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. My name is Sarah Newland. I'm on 43 Turney Road. And so the back of my yard pretty much goes straight to the diner. I'm on the diner side of their property. So I have a few concerns. That music comment really got me, actually, just because I believe that came up in a previous concern from a previous resident, and it sounded like it was not on the original request. So if that was added, that would be an additional concern, I think, for all of the neighbors. I think the general concern that the neighbors have had, or the general consensus, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but has been that this proposal is too large and this site cannot handle it. It's not that we are against change, and it's not that we are against growth, but that the proposal as it stands is too big and is out of scale for what this site can handle in terms of the traffic on one side and the impact of the environment on the other. So my concerns are, and in no particular order, as far as I understand, the POCD, the Board of Ed has asked you guys to consider the impact on the schools, and this would be zoned for, I think it's still Sherman as far as I'm concerned, as far as I understand, but whether it's Sherman or I think it's Holland Hill, these schools are either at or near capacity. And I know that they're saying that the gold population would be downsizing boomers or young married. I'm not sure I see that in the facility planning. If it were downsizing boomers, it seems that if it's midwinter and somebody wanted to get to the diner from their, apartment, they can't, and they don't want to walk there, even if they're on the far side of the apartment. They have to get in their car and now drive through the neighborhood because there is no way to drive basically to the diner on that property. And it just doesn't, there's no generator. So there's no elevator you access in a storm, which we do get here. It doesn't seem like it's geared that way. Young marrieds need more than one car generally to live in this area. I understand there's affordable housing, but generally, so where the other person would park, how that would work, this looks to me very much like it's for students who are using the shuttle. That would be a big concern, I think, to a lot of people in this neighborhood. Students at the beach are a particular population with a particular issues that they bring to the beach. But I don't think that you can rule out the impact on schools. The increase in the tax base would not pay for additional classrooms or additional schools. There are a lot of buildings happening in this area. So overall, I think this board needs to think about the impact on schools, the environmental impact from construction through actual building is massive. The plans do not reflect the true impact. This is a delicate environment. This is a beautiful environment. I'm so grateful to my neighbor, Miss Agate. Her pictures are gorgeous, and she is absolutely right. I was here for Sandy. And my neighbors flood. My grass doesn't go into the marsh. My property line goes into the marsh, but everyone here floods on a heavy rain day. I cannot imagine what this will do. And there should be, I don't understand why there aren't conversations with Bridgeport involved in this, because this will absolutely impact Bridgeport. There is no way that it will not. This will change the constitution of the marsh. This will have impact on not just endangered animals, but threatened animals and deep into the future. My neighbor, when I moved in, would tell me about how she came home and the marsh was burning. And this town has spent a lot of time and money preserving this marsh, and this will undo that years into the future. Oyster beds in the marina, flooding for Bridgeport and for Fairfield to the post road, not the old post road, the post road. I think you need to consider, you deeply, deeply need to consider the impact for all of that. As much as we are all for additional housing, but the scale of this project is much too large for this site. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Miss Harrigan, I forget next.
Stephen Rosato.
And who's
Hi,
after Ms. Rosato?
Thanks, everyone.
After that is Alana Kellen.
Ms. Kellen's up next. Mr. Rosato, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Stephen Rosato. I'm the current chairman of the town's Economic Development Commission. I've been a Fairfield resident for close to 35 years. I've raised 2 kids here. I volunteer for that because I'm very fond of the town. I'm here to endorse the zoning amendment for 441 Post Road, the Circle Inn. The town really has a critical need for a high quality hotel with reasonable prices. I love the Delamar, but that's not exactly affordable for a lot of folks that come into town, particularly with Fairfield Youth students and families and Sacred Heart as well. The decision to approve this project ultimately comes down to the choice between the proposed mixed-use development that we're looking at, which includes a hotel and the larger residential component, or facing a project that's going to be forced us under the A30G. And as experience has proven, the commission would probably face significant challenges in rejecting the latter based on the health and safety concerns that outweigh the affordable need for housing. We are close to a moratorium on that. This sort of helps us be able to maintain that moratorium for maybe a couple consecutive periods as the town catches up on our affordable housing. I feel that proposed design is attractive, it's well conceived, and it will be transformative to this end of town. It's really a gateway to the community, and in addition will enhance the visual appeal of the area. So from the Economic Development Commission, just really think this is something that we should encourage businesses to do something responsibly and benefits the town both financially and the community as a whole. That's it for me, and thanks for taking time, and thanks for the hard work that everyone in this commission does. It's a long night for you guys.
Thank you. I think with 5 of, this may be our last, and I had a comment from Attorney Green. I forget her name already. Kellen, thank you.
Hi, I'm Alana Kevin. I live on South Benson. Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, perfect. Been on mute for so long. And I grew up in the Stratfield area, but currently live on South Benson, moved back here in 2020 after growing up here to raise my kids. And I think it's interesting that the residents that just spoke in favor of this development didn't mention their addresses. Perhaps they aren't directly affected by this, but the people that have spoken and shown pictures, and it really is just hitting home. I don't want my kids riding their bikes on Old Post Road, thinking about the extra traffic, how this is going to impact that with the town hall, with St. Paul's nursery school. You're talking about the diner exit being the main entrance and exit of this enormous new building. I believe that they can take the structure and the amount of rooms that there are there and build something on the footprint that's already there. Why do we have to have something bigger? I think that you have to consider the holiday traffic, July 4th, Halloween, kids walking around those streets, the Memorial Day parade. Again, Sherman, which has been mentioned, is already at capacity. And I think you guys have done a great job. I mean, I've been here 40 years of maintaining the small town feel of Fairfield, and I think this could really affect it negatively. And as far as the entertainment goes, somebody brought up, there are multiple businesses that are empty right now. The old barbecue, Ash Creek Saloon. I mean, go in those spaces. Why are we creating a new development? And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen.
Can we do any more of the public or no?
Let's
I've
try
been
one
waiting
more.
all night to speak.
Then go ahead. Yep, I know you have.
Joe Garrick's is Ness.
Go ahead, Mr. Garrix. This will
Thank
be
you.
our
I
last one.
appreciate it. And I understand it's a long night. Thanks to the commission for their time. I just wanted to say I operate the Fairfield Comedy Circle and have been for the past 8 years at the Circle Hotel. This business exists thanks to the hard work and generosity of Mr. Gormley and his team. It's been a great haven for the arts. And I just want to say that, you know, we appreciate that. I know the community has appreciated it, particularly during COVID, when they even let us use their backyard to have some shows outdoors. I know that made a difference to a lot of people in the community who still come up to me and thank me for it. None of that would happen without the Circle Hotel and their support. Just from my knowledge of working with them as operators, I just want to say I think they're top notch. I think they always have the community in mind. It's something that comes up regularly when we discuss our projects with them. So I just wanted to voice my support for the project. Obviously, you know, every change has its challenges, but I do believe in the project. I do believe in the operators, and I think it will be good for the town. Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll end with the public comment, at least for this portion. Attorney Green, just one parting thought I didn't get a chance to express, but mainly because I wanted to turn to the public. The sense I'm getting from at least your clients, and I know you're not the entire public, but the intervener and your clients, is with the experts being presented, certainly too dense of a project, and that's the problem with it, main problem with it. I guess what I would ask you to do is, in between now and next week, is if there are ways or amendments that you would propose to restrict whatever you feel or your clients feel are the deficiencies with the project, that would be helpful for us. If it was hypothetically cutting off a third, one of the floors, or additional setbacks or whatever, and I'm using hypotheticals. I think that would be helpful for the commission for this, I guess, real predominant reason, because it was brought up, and as you know, with the 830G proposal that's been filed as kind of a backup plan has been set. With the regulation amendments, at the very least, I'm sitting here as a legislator.
Yes.
With the 830G, I turn into a juror
Yes.
with very stringent court standards, with an obligation to make reasonable accommodations, with the obligation that should there be a denial or some kind of condition of approval that gets appealed, that it's the commission's burden to meet a very stringent evidentiary, I'll say stringent evidentiary and legal basis. So if there's a way for this commission, in your client's mind, to potentially address issues in our legislative capacity where we have much more control, that strikes me as a prudent course of action, as opposed to, and I'm not saying this is your position, but a no. And the commission potentially does something, well, essentially we say no, we turn to a 830G and we turn into jurors at that point where we lose a lot of control. If that makes a little sense.
Yes, it makes sense. And certainly it's, once again, I've talked about a more robust planning process and adopting amendments, but what we can do is look at the proposed text amendments and maybe provide comments and suggestions on.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that you may tell me reasonably so. There's nothing we can do because of a variety of reasons. It's just that defective. But I mean, in my sense with engineering and with the landscape and the environmental, the sense I'm getting is where there's a will, there's a way type attitude, that nothing is so defective. And I don't know that. I have to dive into it more because I just got these documents this evening. But I think you know the challenges this commission faces when we have 830Gs in general. And when we have a companion regulation amendment versus an 830G, we have a potential opportunity to work collaboratively in a legislative capacity with the regulation amendments, as opposed to turning more into jurors at that point.
Sure.
So,
I appreciate that suggestion and I'll incorporate that to my report.
I just asked through the chair. I know I asked this on the direct. The 8-30G, it's 535 units. 478. 400 something. So I overstayed. 475.
yeah,
And this is 300 and then the hotel, right?
250 plus the hotel, so it's,
But the hotel doesn't, okay, right now I remember the back. Okay, so.
okay. Fair enough.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will, what's the word? I will adjourn the meeting. I will leave the public comments portion of this hearing open and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for very good professional discussion.